Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college football and all things Giants football. I'm your host, Sal, with my co-host, Monty. What's going on, man?
We're here, man. We finally made it. It's the quarterback episode. Welcome to anybody who's watching us for the first time and all our reoccurring listeners. We appreciate you guys. I know people have been waiting for the quarterback episode. We've been waiting for the quarterback episode. I'm excited to finally have some opinions on these kids.
Right. And uh, little housekeeping. The reason I'm wearing glasses is because one, I'm old, and two, Monty had me staying up all night watching Noah Fafita film. I thought it was a little ridiculous, but he's like, just make sure he's not top five. And I was like, all right, man. So
Have
as I'm
they
burning the midlight,
transferred?
I don't know what he's doing. I don't care. Yes, it's also because I'm a dork. Thank you. Before we begin, we appreciate you guys who are here. We're going to ask for the first time at the beginning of the show, please tell your friends about the pod if you don't mind. I sent out a link on Twitter, retweet it, tell your friends, tell your chats. Let's get everybody in here so we can get this episode going. And if possible, please like on YouTube, subscribe to the show. This is what we expect to be one of our most watched episodes. It was our most watched episode a year ago. So please like, subscribe, share it with your friends. We're going to try to give you some good breakdowns here of the upcoming quarterback class, which should be very relevant to the Giants. So we appreciate all of you guys. I am not late, Stan. I'm not late. I'm right on time. The show's the show. You guys are just early. All right. So take a swig. Before we get into this, very briefly, we usually go over Giant stuff. Here's what I'm going to say about the Giants. Just a couple of things. They suck. There's no reason to talk about them. So fuck that. We're here to talk about the future. Two, I think it's more than coincidence that a freaking plane flies over MetLife a few days ago saying, "Mr. Mayor, please fix this dumpster fire." And then the next thing you know, there's a million drones flying over New Jersey. So I don't think that's coincidence. Russia, if you're listening, fly a drone over MetLife, please.
You think the Russians are after Mara?
I think the Russians want us to fucking fire Joe Shane. How about that? All right. You guys ready to get going with this quarterback review?
Yeah, man.
All right.
Let's do it.
All right. Let's do it. We got a lot to go through here. So just like last year, we have our top five. We're going to go through our top five in this episode. Next week, we plan on going through the next five. So we are going to get through 10 quarterbacks. Unlike last year, finding the extra five in this year's class was challenging. Um, but we have our 10. So we're gonna do our top five today. As we've done all year with all of our episodes, we have reviewed the film on a lot of players. We've picked the five highest graded players for us going into this draft, and we've used our scoring system to try to rank them. And we're going to stick with that as we stuck with every other position group. And as we've done with other episodes, we've kind of used the Bill Walsh guide on scouting players as a guide on our starting point. So just so you guys have some background, Bill Walsh has an online guide on how to scout players. He goes position by position group. We usually read through the thing in depth, go through it, talk about it amongst ourselves, see how much of it is still applicable. Most of it is. It's pretty incredible stuff, actually. And then we try to tie it into modern day stuff that's going on in the NFL. This is an old guide. And try to come up with multiple criteria that we feel are worth grading quarterbacks on or any position. So we are going to go through that as we go through the episode. But I think without further ado, we should probably just jump into the episode, and we have a lot of data to go into. Unless you want to jump into anything else, Monty.
There's just one thing I wanted to add is, just keep in mind, like, we just picked five based off of kind of like going through experts rankings and stuff like that to start. We haven't even looked at the other five. There's a very good chance that the five that we're reviewing next week, two of those guys
Hmm.
could be ahead of the last two we talked. We've really only felt confident about the first three were going to be included, and then it was kind of a fight for doing it. So just, keep in mind, if your guy's not here, he'll be here next week, most likely. And and they could end up rated higher than one of these guys. Who knows?
Yeah, and a lot of the ranking that went into the top five was really how they performed this year. To be totally frank, this year we always take the most recent year's performance, and we have pretty much the whole year except for the kids going to the playoffs to review. So we waited a little longer this year, so we have an entire year of football going into the draft. So we picked the five that were kind of heading into the draft with the most steam. There is still some room for maneuvering there with the playoffs, but that's how we got there. So why don't we start with our QB1? You ready to go?
Yeah, let's talk about Garrett Green.
All right, Garrett Green, West Virginia. No. All right, I'll do
Go ahead.
QB1. Is that cool with you?
Yeah, this is
All
your
right.
guy.
So most of you who know me know that I've been pretty consistently banging this drum for a long time. My QB1 in this class is no other than Shedeur Sanders, quarterback out of Colorado, 6'2", 215 pounds. He's a senior. He was Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, first team Big All Big 12, and he won the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award this year, Pac-12 Newcomer of the Year. He won the Jerry Rice Award. Um, we're going to go into his data and his stats, but needless to say, a highly productive player. Um, Monty has pulled up the stats. You may have to enlarge that screen for people to see.
I don't
Um,
think I can go any bigger on the slides.
all right, so let's just talk about Shador as just right off the rip. Shedeur Sanders fundamentally, his strength as a quarterback is he is a traditional pocket passer. That's where he thrives. He's basically a traditional pocket passer, but he is an outstanding traditional pocket passer. He has tight mechanics. He has a quick release. He has smooth footwork. You can tell he's been well coached. And being the son of Deion Sanders and having NFL bloodlines and access to coaches like Tom Brady, it shows. The full field processor. He's good at it. He throws with anticipation very well. He does it well at every level of the field. He challenges all levels of the field, despite what some would call a less than elite NFL arm. We'll get into that. But he shows good touch and ball placement. He's accurate. One of the areas he's really accurate, something we'll talk about here with quarterbacks, because I think accuracy is a topic that I think gets discussed erroneously sometimes. Accuracy is not completion percentage. Accuracy is maximizing your production on any given throw, at least in my definition. And what that means on a lot of plays is leading your receiver and having the ball placement that allows your playmakers to make the maximal play for yardage gain. He thrives at that. This is probably the best part of his game is his ability to put the ball exactly where it needs to be for a receiver to go get it and maximize the act. He layers his throws very nicely. He shows that ability to loop it over defenders at the intermediate and deep level. He has a lot of good timing on hole shots. And I think very importantly, there are two things that matter. And I know you're going to go into the data here, but he is at his best in high leverage situations. He's at his best in the red zone. So in the highest level of leverage, in the big moments, he gets better and better and better. And a factor that we will go into that really I think matters at the NFL level, this is a guy who does not put the ball in harm's way. He rarely, if ever, turns the ball over or makes plays that are turnover worthy. So he protects the ball well. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and he really just distributes the ball beautifully. He's really a perfect point guard in that way. Um, there are some negatives to his game, of course, and we'll get into that now. I'll let you chime in on your thoughts, but I think the big negative with him when you watch him is he probably just takes too many sacks. He allows too many pressures to lead to sacks, and that's probably because he's holding on to the ball too long and he's trying to make too many big plays as opposed to taking layups sometimes when they're there. Um, and that can translate in terms of interpretation of how he's being scouted as being an issue with pocket awareness. I don't think it's so much pocket awareness. I think it's more instinct to make big plays. But that's kind of where I am with him in terms of my evaluation. To me, the bottom line is this is an outstanding NFL quarterback. He's a day one quarterback. I think he's a starting franchise quarterback. I'm higher on him than most, but I want to hear your thoughts on Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty aligned on it, and I think you nailed most of this on him. I mean, this is a guy who, like you said, he doesn't have the he's not the doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but I think he's a guy who's capable of making every throw. He's not necessarily going to make those throws that most quarterbacks can't make, like throws he's not supposed to make, like a Justin Herbert can do or something like that. But he can make every throw that you ask him within any offense. I think he's scheme versatile in that sense. Although I think something like a West Coast would work better for him, but I still think he can work outside of that. Extremely, extremely poised quarterback. You touched on that. He obviously has some issues. He takes sacks he shouldn't take, and causes some pressures for himself. And maybe that's not in the sense that he's poised, but this guy can deliver a football under constant pressure, and with defenders in his face, his accuracy doesn't really fade. And that's what you're kind of talking about. His superpower is his accuracy. He is extremely, extremely accurate. He especially with his ability to lead receivers. That's where you really see it. And when we looked at the other five guys, they did not sniff the level that Shedeur constantly was leading these guys. The only time I really kind of saw his accuracy fade was, kind of on some of these vertical routes. I saw him not exactly hit them the way this be hit, but I've also seen him nail them perfectly. So, that's just the only spot where it was a little bit spotty. I as far as the bad stuff, I thought his pre-snap processing needs some work. When the blitz came fast, he really needs to know his hot read and where to get it off instead of not knowing where to go and taking those sacks. Uh, he can kind of have a weak base at times in the pocket. He didn't really have his feet planted the way he should, and I feel like that shows up in some of his throw strength at times. The kind of just nitpicking at him. The biggest thing is really just that he causes his own pressures and that he kind of thinks has more athleticism than he does. It feels like he's trying to be like Kyler Murray back there at times, totally trying to run backwards and get away from these guys. And although I think he's a very good athlete and very good at using his athleticism, he's not the athlete to what he tries to play with. I wanted to touch on some of the stats that you alluded to here with that really kind of go into one of the biggest things he has is this guy is clutch. He is a very, very clutch player. I think I want to go into a little bit of 2023 first because 2024 he was very clutch. Very good player, but 2023 he was special there. Going into that, he was only quarterback nationally with more than 6 touchdowns. He had 11 with no interceptions in the fourth quarter. He went 67 of 92, had a 72.8 completion percentage, threw for 1,039 yards, 11 touchdowns, and no interceptions. On 3rd and 10 plus, he was a nation's leading 16 first downs hitting. He went 30 for 40 for 66.7 passes for 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then on 4th down, he was one of 2 quarterbacks in the country to have first down every passing attempt. He went 5 for 5, 99 yards and 2 touchdowns. So his 2023 is pretty phenomenal, and that's where he broke on the scene. And he was really, truly the most clutch quarterback in the country last year. It hasn't been as quite as elite, but still pretty damn impressive. I did some research on this for a 3rd and 7 plus. So 3rd and long. This is something we preached a lot last year. It's a big reason we like JJ McCarthy because he was elite in this. He's kind of the outlier. If we won't go into too much like as far as compared to him because he had almost a 50% completion rate. It's really was crazy numbers, but Shedeur was higher as far as his he had a 31.1 conversion rate on 3rd and 7 plus, which was higher in Caleb Williams, was higher in Drake May, was higher in Michael Penix. Very, very impressive. He had a 97.51 passer rating on that. It was a 69.1 completion percentage, 797 yards, 7 touchdowns, 2 picks. So really, really good there. An extremely impressive quarterback when the moment's biggest. Yeah, I mean, anything else you want to add on that, Sal?
No, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, I think what defines Shador are those key features, right? He's a mechanically sound quarterback who looks like he's got those NFL bloodline coaching techniques down. He is completely unfazed by pressure. Sometimes to his detriment, but completely unfazed. He stands strong in the pocket and he delivers and he produces at the highest levels when the game is on the line, when it's 3rd and long, when it's those high leverage situations. When you read Bill Walsh's guide, because I went back and read it before we did our episode again, I read it a second time. That's something he concludes his quarterback review with, is ultimately what makes quarterbacks great is that ability to make plays when everything is breaking down again around them and when the situation is the biggest, the 3rd and long, when there's 22 guys running around crazy and somebody has to take control. That's what defines a great quarterback. Those are the guys who win games in those final drives. Those are the guys who have those big playoff victories. I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I think it's a feature that we don't discuss enough when we're talking about college prospects because I think it's the kind of thing that does translate. You see it. You either have that clutch gene or you don't, right? And he's got it. He's got it as good as anybody in this class. He's got it better than anybody in this class for certain. Although the guy we're going to talk about after him is close. Um, and I think that he's almost as good as anybody from last year's class outside of JJ McCarthy in that clutch gene, and at least in terms of statistical production. Um, so those are the defining features that will play into our comps. Um, so I think we should save our comps to the end. Why don't we go through our grades first, or do you want to do the comps first?
No, yeah, we can do the comps at the end. Before we get to that, let's just look at this real quick. This is we'll have these for each players. You can find this on PFF, but it's essentially just a chart and to look where each one of these quarterbacks are most successful. You can really see for Shedeur, I'd look at the NFL passer rating as just an easy way to kind of scan through this and see where he's successful. And you can see this is a guy that's really successful at basically every
Everywhere.
area of the field.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll see some guys as we go through them that have some, pretty apparent weaknesses in some of these areas. With Shador, that really doesn't stand out. If anything, you might point to, the under 10 intermediate. He had 3 interceptions in there. And so he had the other 4. So maybe in the middle field, he takes a little bit more too many risks. Can't maybe doesn't quite have the zip to get these in. Some other guys have, whatever it might be. That's
Can
really the
I?
only spot you can do it. Go ahead.
I will say this. That part of the field, that middle quadrant, the middle of the field, 10 to 20 yard range is the most offensive line dependent like segment of the field. Because if you think about this, if you're throwing the deep ball, usually it's a few steps. It's a quick look, making sure you have leverage, which he recognizes very well with his receivers and releasing the ball quickly. Obviously, quick game, the ball's out fast. It's those intermediate routes that take time to develop, right? You're running in like a deep, a crosser in the middle of the field, or you're running a multiple route concept and you're waiting for the safety to pull to throw the ball. That's where he is at his worst. And I do believe, and I'm not trying to make excuses, but I think when you watch his games, and I've watched pretty much all his Colorado games the last couple of years, that's where his offensive line will break down and make it difficult for him to make a play. And he has not had good offensive line play at Colorado. So I think if there's any explanation for that potentially, that's based off of O-line, it's that little area. But otherwise, as you said, he excels in every segment of the field.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so you want to get into our grades and then we'll finish off with our comps.
Yeah, be careful when you put up the grades because on the page it's got a hold on, let me just change something here. So you're gonna have to just make sure you don't pull up the comps and you pull up the grades.
Okay, I mean I have it on the slide here.
Perfect. All right. So these are our so we have what do we have? 12 total criteria here for quarterbacks. 10 of them are being graded here, are 10. So as opposed to 6, we have 10 gradable criteria. Those are, and this is again based off Bill Walsh, mechanics, arm strength, and then we separated arm strength from other features of throwing, which really all feed into arm talent. We made a conscious decision to do that to break down each category. But mechanics is 1, arm strength is 2, accuracy is 3, release is 4, touch is 5, processing is 6. That includes pre and post snap processing to the best of our ability to understand on film. You're limited watching this stuff, but whatever we can see. Leadership is 7. That again, that's something Bill Walsh touches on. It's something you have to get from outside just the tape. Mobility, resilience, something Bill Walsh talks about, the ability to be a resilient player, come back from games, make a mistake, come back and lead your team, and then the clutch factor, which is something we talked about. Those are our 10 gradable scores that we are going to figure into the final grade. We have a Giants grade and as per usual, the goon factor. So mechanics, you gave Shedeur 3, I gave him a 4. I don't think we're that different. I felt that his mechanics were. Oh, by the way, just for people watching for the first time, our grading system works like this: 1 is not an NFL player, 2 is a below average NFL player, 3 is an average NFL player, 4 is an above average to borderline Pro Bowl player in that feature, and 5 is like an all pro or perennial all pro type ability. So that's where the scores come from, and we get a cumulative score from all of these mechanics. You have them as average mechanics at 3. I have him above average to borderline Pro Bowl at 4. Do you want to discuss that at all? Do you feel anything strong about it, or what was the
Sure.
reason you felt he was average?
Yeah, I thought there was a lot of things he did really well. I mentioned some where I didn't feel like he had a strong base at times. I felt like he was kind of didn't really set his feet when he was passing, even when he had time to do so. And I felt like there was times his footwork got sloppy. I saw him, crossing his feet during drops back. And he, kind of a little bit too relaxed, not really like as refined as you want it at times. I think he's very capable to do it, but I thought that led to some issues with him. But overall, I mean, it's good enough to be a plug and play NFL
Yeah.
starter for
I mean,
sure.
and I viewed his mechanics, and I'm talking about everything from his footwork, the way he snaps the ball, the way he holds the ball, the release, all that to be sort of above average NFL, you know, replicable play after play. Yes, there were some plays where he broke down, but that's why I gave him a 4. Arm strength, we both gave him a 3. I think we both think he has plenty of NFL arm to make all the throws, but not what we would call an elite NFL arm.
Yeah, and if I felt like he could only be in like a West Coast offense or something, I
It'd
probably
be a
would have given
2.
him a 2. Yeah, because like although it's average starter for that type of offense, it would make him scheme dependent. I don't think he's scheme dependent.
He's not. No. Accuracy, we both gave him a 4. I think we both agree above for the reasons we already discussed. He's an above average player. This is his calling card and ball placement and
Mm,
accuracy.
and it was closer to 5 than it was 3.
Agreed. Release 4, very smooth mechanics. Gets the ball out quickly, no wasted motion, snaps the wrist, the ball's out. Same thing,
Good arm
closer to 5.
flexibility.
Yep. Touch, we both gave him a 4. He drops the ball in the bucket beautifully on
Mhm.
way more plays than he misplaces them, and he shows the ability to layer throws in the middle of the field very nicely, which is something that is important. Um, Touch, I'll stop here just for a second. Touch matters, right? And it's not just like those deep bucket throws, it's the ability to throw the ball in a way where it's catchable by your receiver. That's essential, right? You have a guy running an intermediate crossing route. If you throw it, 100 miles an hour at him, as our friend One says, about Daniel Jones, Danny Dodgeball, trying to break people's hands, it's not a very catchable ball, and you get a higher rate of drops. Drops can be a quarterback stat, right? The way you throw
Yep.
the ball and place the ball leads to drops or catches. So touch also incorporates the ability to layer it, drop it right in the receiver's hand, an easy way to catch. He excels at that. So 4
Mhm.
there. Processing, we differed a little bit. You gave him a 3. I gave him a 4. I'll go into that a little bit. I
Yep.
thought that I agree with you. I know where you're getting the 3 from. You would prefer that he identify pressure pre-snap and get the
Right.
ball out to hot routes quicker, right? And to on a blitz or something like that rather than hold the
Yes,
ball.
mostly, and there were just a few times, and I sent it to you that there was clear times I just felt like he was missing things in his progressions and guys that were popping up wide open. But it wasn't like a lot more than any other guy, but it was more than
Yeah.
I'd like.
Oh, that's totally fair. Here's why I gave him a 4, because he generally recognizes defense and reads them very well pre-snap. He knows exactly what the defense is showing him. He knows how his progressions are going to change. He's like a general out there. He's doing it himself. The other thing I think he does very well, and I think part of this is similar to what Caleb Williams dealt with last year in that offense, is there's a tendency to hold the ball longer because, quite frankly, if he doesn't make big plays with his arm, that offense is going nowhere. There was no run. There's no real run game. It's a very Shedeur dependent offense. Obviously, Travis Hunter is amazing, but somebody's got to get him the ball, right? So I do think this was somewhat a reflection of the offense, where it was a lot of Shedeur having to make plays. Maybe it's a tendency, but I thought there was enough processing where I think he'd be above average the NFL level. But I think our difference here is pretty minimal.
Hmm.
Uh, Leadership, we both gave him a 3. Now, I could have given him a 4 here for how he's done this year, but we should talk about this.
This one's so interesting. I didn't know what way you were going on this one.
I gave him, I think on the field and what he has displayed this year in the season is a 4, borderline 5 as a leader. He's a field general, and he's matured a lot. And we could have given him a 4 or 5. I dropped it to a 3 simply because of his comments about his offensive line, where he threw the lineman
Hmm.
under the bus. He made comments for the season on Twitter about a player who left.
Two
He's a
players.
kid. Yeah. He's a kid. He's immature, right? Kids do stupid
Hmm.
things in this era of social media. Old men like me have to get used to young people, doing dumb things on social media, even though I do dumb things on social media every single day. Um, but I do think if you're grading leadership, you have to factor that in, right? Because it's going to factor in. NFL teams are going to sit down with Shador at the combine and be like, "Tell me about this tweet." You
Yeah.
guarantee that's going to happen, right? So I gave him a 3 based on that. Why did you give him a 3?
I truly went ahead and sat on the fence here. I felt like we were gonna show this people. There's gonna be people watching this who are saying that Shedeur's leadership is a 1, and there's people who are gonna say it's a 5. And it truly, like, I see the arguments for both because there are certain things that's gonna rub you the wrong way that you cover Shedeur that you typically don't want from your quarterback for your leader of your team. But at the same time, it's like people are going to look at Shedeur and they're going to look at him as like a culture changer. He's a guy who changes the culture of your team and like brings a different vibe to it and really can get you could see guys rallying around this guy. You really could go either way in it. I kind of just sat in the middle on this one.
That's fair enough. Um, Mobility, we both gave you gave him a 4. I gave him a 3. I probably could have given him a 4.
Mm-hmm.
I only didn't give him a 4 because while he has the athleticism and the mobility to use his legs to be a dual threat, much like Michael Penix last year, he scrambles to throw, he doesn't scramble to run, and you just don't see him use it, and it doesn't threaten the defense. So I gave him a 3. Why did you give him a 4?
I felt he was very good at using his athleticism. I felt, I definitely think he's an above average athlete, but I felt like he's a guy who used it very well and was able to was very natural extending plays. So, I think his athleticism is probably a 3. I think his mobility is a 4.
Fair enough. Resilience, we both gave him a 5. All you have to do is watch Shedeur Sanders play every Saturday.
This
The
was the
kid is
easiest one.
he's made of steel. He's incredibly resilient. He always bounces back and makes his team better because he puts them on his back.
He
Clutch
has
factor, yeah. You
I
got
just want to say with the resilience, this dude has such a target on his back. Every single time he plays teams, they want to kill him. They want to embarrass him. They are taking cheap shots at him, and he gets up every single time and he just plays ball. If you're looking for a guy who's gonna deal with a bad offensive line, is gonna gets killed, has all the pressure in the world. He's handled it on field at least phenomenally.
right. Clutch. You gave him a 4. I gave him a 5 here.
Yeah.
I've seen him make so many, like we talked about, third and long, red zone, game-ending situations, play after play after play. The guy makes plays. I'm giving him a 5. Is there a reason you didn't think he met 5, or it was just hard to get to a 5 period?
It was mostly based off of this year. I we'll talk about another guy that I did give a 5 to, and going off the what I saw this year, I thought there was a clear distinction. Basically after this grade is really kind of dug into it and saw some of those. Obviously, I knew he was good last year, 2023 in those situations, but I didn't really realize how good he was, and I didn't update post that. I don't know if I would change it, but I think you're definitely looking at more of a 4 this year. I think more of a 5 in 2023. So it's tough.
Fair enough. And then the non-scoring grades, Giants grade, you gave him a 4, I gave him a 5. And Goon Factor, we both gave him a 4. Um, Cumulative score, you have him at a 3.7, I have him at 3.9. So we're basically grading him out as an above average NFL starter, bordering on a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think that's probably where he's going to fundamentally land in most grading systems.
Yeah,
You know,
I
so
agree.
yeah, I mean, is there so let's go into our comps. Um, we both have 2 different comps for him, which is interesting, and I want to get into it very briefly before we move on to the next guy. Um,
Two
why
comps
don't you
we've
give the
talked about for a while now too.
right?
Both of us have
So,
said this one.
so you give your comp first, and I'll give mine.
Sure. So I've said this comp many times. I've said this comp since last year, and the more I dug into it, the more I liked it. And thank God, like people might not kill me because this guy's actually starting to ball out. Because I made this comp before this guy was struggled, but he reminds me a lot of Bryce Young at Alabama. 6'2" Bryce Young. You're not going to deal with the height issues that Bryce Young. Obviously, that's not the only reason Bryce Young has struggled in the NFL is his height, but it's definitely a big part of it. He reminds me so much of him with the way he can extend from the pocket, his poise, just his overall physical abilities, I think really are similar. And 2 things that really jumped out to me where I was like, okay, I like this comp even more than what I said before. So I'm going to go into, a negative for Bryce Young and Shedeur Sanders and a positive. So I'll start with what we've already gone into and was like what he does on third and long. So if you look at what Shedeur did in third and long, he said 31.15 first down conversion rate. And then if you look at Bryce Young in his last year at Alabama, 32%. So very, very similar there. Bryce Young was 50%, 472, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Shedeur was 57%, 577 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So somewhat close there. And then from on the negative side, where I was kind of looking at this, was what I mentioned with where where Shedeur Sanders kind of causes his own pressures. As much as offensive line is an issue, you can track PFF's not perfect, but they'll track, quarterbacks caused own pressures. Let's see. Shedeur had 41 pressures that they accredited to him this year, which led all of college football. He was credited with 16 QB own sacks, which again led all of college football. And his percentage of pressure responsibility is 27.9, which was 5th in college football. So a little bit went into just how often he was pressured, but still not great. Now, if you go to Bryce Young from his final year, Bryce Young, let's see, he had 35 own pressures, 7 QB own sacks, and he was accredited for 34%. So like 7% higher than Shedeur even. Like it was a big issue for Bryce Young too that people didn't really even talk. I don't know if people even talking about too much of the time. Shedeur gets killed for it. Bryce Young kind of got away with it. Bryce Young had that same issue there where he tried to do too much at times and wasn't quite the athlete to get away with it. They both kind of come there. So, both have like that slimmer build too. I really think it's a good comp. And I think the fact that a guy like Bryce Young is starting to really play better is bodes well for a guy like Shedeur Sanders in the draft process.
6'2" Bryce Young is a Pro Bowler, is an All Pro to be honest, most likely.
Possible.
My comp for him is one I've mentioned multiple times. It's Joe Burrow. Um, I said this last year when we reviewed Shedeur Sanders. I can't help but see Joe Burrow every time I watch this kid play. I know some people think that's like sacrilege because Joe Burrow right now looks like a top 2, top 3 quarterback in the NFL. But Joe Burrow profiles very similarly to Shedeur Sanders. They're not enormous athletes. They don't have measurables that are like Josh Allen. Like they definitely don't have elite NFL arm strength, but what they have is incredible arm talent. They process well. They throw with anticipation. I think they're very good in the clutch. They handle pressure well. They have good touch. They hit every part of the field, and they don't make a lot of mistakes. That's critical. I think you mentioned this to me before when I told you this. Now his number has gone up, but about a week or so ago, or 2 weeks ago, Shedeur Sanders adjusted his completion percentage. We want that around like 70%, 75%. He's one of the highest. He's the best in the class, actually.
He is the best in the
82.7%.
country.
Best in the country, 82.7% adjusted completion percentage. He was 81.9% about 2 weeks ago. Joe Burrow's number in 2019 when he was the number one, when that great year at LSU, 81.9%. And that, you can see it on film. It just jives, right? You can see the connection there. I'm not saying he's gonna have a Joe Burrow-like career, but if I'm comping stylistically to a player, I do like the Joe Burrow comp here. So Joe Burrow, Bryce Young, I mean, these are good names for a draft prospect. So he is our QB1. Um, if there are things he needs to work on, obviously we talked about it. It's, not creating his own pressures and his own sacks. I think some of that stuff is coachable. But what he has and what he does well, which is something we should focus on more, translates very well at the NFL level. So that's our QB1, Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, just shout out Professor O. He's right. Click the like button. He said, or Brian Dable and Joe Shane will get tenure section. You don't want that. So, make sure you hit the like button.
Or we'll send a drone to your house. And Professor, by the way, Matt, Professor, those of you who don't know, Matt Owen has his own YouTube program. He is a Cowboys content creator and one of the nicest, most knowledgeable people that you'll come across on this app. So one of our close friends on Twitter, good guy. Give him a follow too if you can, and watch his show if you want to check out some pretty cool Cowboy stuff. He goes over NFC stuff a lot. So and
Yeah.
he's a great resource for going over college football and stuff as
Yeah.
well.
And
He
shout out Matt. He hooked us up with a couple all 22 tape we were missing. We didn't have
yeah.
quite enough as we wanted, so we got it for him.
He asked if, as a Georgia man, he asked if we've already gone over QB1 Carson Beck, and obviously we did, Matt. He was discussed before. He's so good, we discussed him before the episode, so we won't have to go over him today. So there you go. All right, let's move on to QB2. Why don't you introduce him, Monty?
Yep. All right. So QB2. I don't think anyone's surprised by this, but Cam Ward out of Miami, 6'2", 223 pounds. He was a 0-star recruit. He's a senior. He's in his 5th year because he's in his COVID year. Um, had a great year as far as these awards go. ACC Player of the Year, ACC Offensive Player of the Year, first team All ACC. He's a Heisman Trophy finalist, and as of tonight, he's the Davy O'Brien Award winner. So best quarterback in the country.
Congratulations, Cam Ward.
Yeah, congrats. And it was a great year. 67.4 completion percentage, 4,123 yards, 36 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 9.5 yards per attempt, 196 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, 4 fumbles. It was way down from the amount of fumbles he's had in the past, which, 14 the year before. So big improvement in a lot of ways for him. No, but I was I'm a big fan of Cam Ward. He's right there with Shedeur Sanders for me. Just talk a little bit about him. He's a talented and creative quarterback. He's like a really natural arm talent and unique ability to extend plays. He has a whippy throwing motion. It generates some impressive velocity. He has a really good arm flexibility to use arm angles and showcase he's an adaptable passer. His crafty scrambling ability and strong build, it makes him really difficult to sack. He's very good at, destroying angles from defenders, even though he's not the most athletic guy in the world. And he has, 6'2", 223. He's a very stout build. He's difficult to take down. You can see that on tape. He, like I mentioned, he did have some ball security issues, but it got a lot better for him this year, which is good to see. On the negative side, he has some really inconsistent ball placement. You can see that show up, sometimes phenomenal, but it's inconsistent. He has a tendency to hold the ball too long. And you try to go kind of big play hunt. At the expense of some easy completions, and it kind of limits his effectiveness at times. It's interesting, pretty obvious when you watch him play. He has like a really nonchalant playing style. It's interesting. It's hard to say if it's a good thing or a bad thing. But he's just so relaxed when he's out there. But he, when he's making plays, it looks great. When he's brain turns off and he makes a stupid decision, it looks bad, and which he does have a tendency to do at times. He'll make a decision. You'll have no idea why he decided to throw that ball. It's not like it looks like it was even misplaced. It was just like, why did you do that? So that's definitely an issue with him. But despite those flaws, he's such like a special natural talent. He has such great creativity. It makes him a really intriguing prospect who I think could really thrive in a system that allows him to capitalize on, those improv abilities and, use his arm angles and things along those lines and, really play into what makes Cam Ward special. So what do you have, Sal?
I think you hit all the key features here. I describe Cam as, so the way you try to differentiate these two, Shedeur and Cam, because that's gonna look, if the Giants finish for the top overall pick, which hopefully they do. I mean, by the way, apparently they had a red zone drill today. For those who don't know,
No.
threw 17 passes and went 0 for 17 against nobody in the red zone. 0 for 17 in practice. I mean, they're so good at the tank that they're tanking in practice. It's incredible. Like, so anyway,
What good
so
tankers.
yeah, it looks like the number one overall pick to me. If we finish with the number one overall pick, the discussion from the time the season ends, the moment it ends, right to the draft is going to be Shedeur or Cam Ward. I mean, GM discussion and all that stuff aside, the question will be Shedeur or Cam Ward. That's going to be the topic of debate. It's going to be the topic going all the way up to the draft. It's going to be really interesting. And it's hard to differentiate these two in terms of who truly is number one. They're closely graded, but for different reasons. What you get in Shador, I think, is, and I think I credit Matt for telling me this last year, and I've thought about it. Said quarterback's a floor position. You know, you want to make sure you don't miss on the floor of a quarterback, and you want upside, but you definitely need that hard floor. With Shador, I do think there's a hard floor. I personally think. I think as a passer. With Cam, I think the floor is a little bit less steady, although you can argue with his running ability, it's good. But I think there's no doubt that in terms of arm ability, arm talent, arm strength, and just natural athleticism, the ceiling is higher with Cam Ward. I think that's fair to say.
Yes.
That his upside is higher than Shedeur Sanders because he's just physically able to do things that Shedeur Sanders cannot do. And that's what differentiates the two of them. Play style wise, very different players. Like you mentioned, uh, Cam Ward on every snap before he throws the ball, he looks like he's chilling playing a video game on his couch. Like he's holding the ball down here, just kind of like hanging
Yeah.
out. Feet are not moving at all. He's hanging out. I mean, um, you said I don't know what to call that. I asked my dear friend Nunu, what is that called when he what is that? Why does he do that? And she said that's called aura. So maybe it's aura, you know. So shout out Nunu for that. But he just sits there with his feet almost like they're trapped to the ground in mud, and you're like, hey, you're watching, you're like, Cam, the play started, do something, right? Move, do something, do anything. And he'll stand there, he's just kind of chilling and doing nothing. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he decides he's going to throw the ball, and he whips that ball out of his hand so quick you can't even see it. Like the frame moves too quick, like it moves faster than the frame, and he just shoots out a rocket out of his arm, and the ball's flying down the field. And he makes this incredible throw. So I mean, it's frustrating to watch for like 80% of the rep when you're watching him, and then he just does these incredible things. I've also described his play style as like, he's got pressure coming at him. He's not moving. He's like Neo in the Matrix, right? With the bullets coming at him, he's just
Yeah.
standing there and he's like, right? Like just
He
standing there, like he's gonna stop it in the Matrix. He has just this nonchalant control. It works for him. It scares the crap out of me sometimes just watching him, but it works for him, you know?
Yeah, and he senses pressure so well. Like it's he's not even looking at it. He can just feel when the pressure's coming. Something we were talking about this a little bit earlier today on Spaces. Something that says like they're both poised, like Shador and Cam, just in different ways. Shador's is more like no matter what pressure is in his face, he's gonna be able to make a throw, no matter how many people are coming down on him. Pressure can get to Cam Ward a little bit when he's trying to throw. But as far as like you saw those sack rates and things like that for Shedeur, that can definitely like cause him to get off the mark and not be in a position to make a play and get sacked. Cam Ward, he feels it, he gets out of the way, and he doesn't take as
Yeah,
many negative plays as you would expect for a guy with his
that play
play
style.
style. Yeah,
Yeah.
he really has a good feel to navigate the pocket and sense the pressure before it even gets to him.
Yep. Um, I obviously, like we talked about, I mean, he's a special talent. I think there's no doubt about it. I've been watching this kid now for 3 years since he transferred from Incarnate Word to Washington State.
Yep.
He's had quite the journey, right? I mean, Incarnate Word, 2 years of Washington State to Miami, and a favorite of the draft community for a few years, and he finally puts it all together at Miami this year. And he's definitely earned every bit of this, from a zero-star recruit to potentially the top overall pick. Quite the journey, but he's a special prospect. I mean, all I can say about him is much like Shador. While they have very different play styles, what they have very much in common is that dog mentality, that
Yes.
leader, that clutch gene, that I don't care what the damn score is. It's the fourth quarter. I'm putting you guys on my back, and we're winning this fucking game mentality. That he has. That
Yes.
Shedeur has. These two have that. So when I've been critical of this, and you and I both been critical of this draft class. A year ago, we wanted to take a quarterback at 6, so we wouldn't have to be doing this because we knew this class was going to be weak, and it is weak compared to last year's class.
Yes.
But these two are not weak. These two belong, in my opinion. And
Correct.
they have that it factor. They have that clutching. So, you know, again, the difference between these two fundamentally, I think Shador is a more stable, like he's just a mechanically more stable, reliable passer. In my opinion, a better floor prospect. Cam, a little bit more variance with mechanics is the nice way to put it, and nonchalant play style, but like a higher upside with athletic gifts and arm strength. But great field generals, great leaders, winners, big time producers, take one and forget it kind of approach to both of these guys.
Yeah.
I think we should get into their grades, unless you want to. Do you want to go into the passing depth, or do you want to jump into the grades?
I wanted to touch on a couple quick things before we move on.
Sure, go for it.
One thing I forgot to mention too, just kind of a con that I noticed with him, and you mentioned it, how low he holds that football at times,
Yeah,
and I think if that's something he cleans up, I think that will help him in a couple of ways. I felt like he wasn't necessarily the best anticipatory passer. I felt like he could kind of be late on balls, and we talked about this. I think part of that is because he holds it so low, it takes him a second to really get the ball out and get it to where it needs to be. Even when you kind of see his eyes see something, it doesn't get there quite as fast as you want it to be. I think part of the reason is because he holds it so low. And I think the other thing is he's had some serious fumbling issues. Like I said, it went away this year. It was only 4 fumbles, 14 last year. I think he had 14 his first year at Washington State, or maybe it was at Carnegie Ward. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's been an issue for him. So those are two things. And the other thing I want to do, because we mentioned this for Shedeur, I wanted to touch on, we mentioned how clutch this guy is, how good he is in big moments. I just
yeah,
wanted to give a couple more stats onto that. So with Cam Ward, he had a 39.02 third down conversion rate on 3rd and 7 plus. That out of the 5 guys we're going to talk about, that's number 1. Shedeur is number 2. So, and he had Shedeur beat by like 7% there. He had 87.25 passer rating at 3rd and 7 plus. That's 3 out of 5. But he has his issues. He'll throw a random pick and things along those lines, so that'll bring it down. But his fourth quarter passing stats, and that's what really made Cam Ward special this year. Cam Ward did some stupid shit, put him into some bad holes this year, but he seemed to always find a way when he put himself in those holes to battle out every time. And you don't love seeing a guy put himself into those holes, but when you're evaluating a prospect, seeing them get put in that position and come back is really what you want to see. And it shows in his fourth quarter stats. He had a 69.9 completion percentage, 1,028 yards, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 134.16 passer rating. I mean, really, really impressive numbers for the fourth quarter. Sounded a lot like kind of what we heard from Shedeur Sanders 2023 season.
yep. No, these guys they both have it, man. They've got that clutching. It's so essential. You cannot be great in the NFL without that clutching. And if you're taking a quarterback at the top of the first round, you want that greatness factor, right? You want that in their DNA. These guys both have it. So I appreciate that in both of them. Let's get into some of his detailed passing data. So you have the chart
Yep.
pulled up here, and I think this tells a pretty good story. I mean, for those who want to just browse it really quickly, this is this year's passing depth again. If you're not familiar with the chart, below the blue line is before the line of scrimmage. Left, center, right, and then it's 0 to 10 yards, 10 to 20, 20 and above, and it breaks it down nicely. PFF does a nice charting system of NFL passer rating, their touchdown interceptions, their completions. Bottom line is very consistent across the board, pretty much everywhere. He does well everywhere. I mean, he's had a good year. There's not, if you scan the chart, there are not a lot of areas of the field where he struggles. Again, much like Shedeur, if there's any quote weak area, and it's not really weak, but his relatively weakest area in terms of turnovers, at least, is in that intermediate center area. Um, that intermediate middle of the field area. But again, I mean, think about where that is, right? That's often where you have your safety sitting. That's often where linebackers drop into coverage if you're playing like a Tampa 2 type system. It's where you have a lot of traffic. So it makes sense, right? Where you would have a little bit of more interceptions there, more turnovers, but for the most part, it's pretty good everywhere.
Yeah, worth noting too, 20 plus yards outside to the right, 76.5
Yeah, that's
NFL
a
pass
right.
rating. So not great up there. No interceptions or anything like that, but 5 for 20. So, he's
Yeah.
had some issues completing up there. But yeah, nothing bad. And look, when you go to this chart and you look at Shedeur's chart, you look at that between the numbers underneath 10 yards. That's where a lot of plays are going to be in the NFL. And you see both of them have a ton of reps there. Both have over 100 targets in that area, which is, it's good to see. You're not going to see that amount of targets with everybody we're going over here. Some just because, other guys aren't in its prolific passing offenses, and other guys who's just their offenses don't use the middle of the field like these guys do.
Deacon makes a good point here in the chat that a couple of times he threw back across his body into the middle of the field for those interceptions, and that's true. I mean, that is a feature of Cam Ward. Like he does Josh Allen level stupid shit, like
It's
just for
the
no
Cam Ward
reason whatsoever.
experience.
Right. The Cam Ward experience is a roller coaster, right? Like he starts great, and then he has 2 quarters of absolute brain dead football where he makes mistakes like that, throwing the ball for no reason into trouble. And then his team is down 15 points going or 16 points going to the fourth quarter, and then he does superhero shit in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's the Cam Ward experience, whereas Shedeur is more of like a steady performer all game, and then he turns it up in the fourth quarter. It's remarkable how these guys are clutch, but yes, he's more hit or miss, during the game. Um,
Yep.
but overall, when you take the collective picture, the pros heavily outweigh the cons with Campbell. I mean, heavily outweigh the cons. This is
Yeah.
this is a major league prospect here with elite upside.
And I'll say, the Cam Ward experience is a reason why you and I were a little bit skeptical in this year. Like I said, we've been following this guy for a long time. And if you're a big college football fan, big NFL draft fan, you've been following Cam Ward for a long time. He is an exciting player to watch. But Cam Ward experience is a lot of the reason why he was, he went back to school.
He was a,
He
he,
wanted to come out last year and he decided best to go back. And it was a great decision for him. It's what we thought he should do. And I didn't think it was going to pay off the way it did, but damn, did it pay off for him.
Let's go into the scores now because I think this will discuss. We're able to discuss some of the other factors since we put a lot of thought into these scores again. So mechanics, we out of the 1 to 5, we both gave him a 2. With all due respect, with Cam Ward, my God, his mechanics they leave a lot to be desired. Now he does all his work despite inconsistent mechanics, but he has below average NFL mechanics right now. I think that's fair to say. Can that be worked on in the NFL and coached up? Absolutely. A good QB coach, Palmer worked with Josh Allen. I mean, these are correctable things. So,
Yeah. Uh,
um,
I'll say the easy thing I think really correct is that fact that he holds the ball so low. He needs to get that up high. I think that will help with a lot of his talk about anticipatory passing and with the fumbles. But one thing that's going to be interesting is he has a very funky throwing motion, and it allows him. He has a very good arm flexibility. It lets him go from a lot of different arm slots, but his natural throwing motion is not typical at all. And that makes it harder for him to be a consistent passer. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't become a consistent passer. You look at a guy like Phillip Rivers. That guy has one of the funkiest throwing motions I've ever seen, but he found a way to be consistent with it. So, that's going to be something. It'll be interesting how they try to coach that. If they try to just coach to improve that, or if they try to coach to a more natural throwing motion. I'm not sure the way that will get handled.
if you just coach him to hold the ball here and not below his hip, I think that's a major improvement in his mechanics. I don't see why he has to hold the ball here where he's prone to fumbles, Just simple things like that would make a big difference in the turnovers. So I think that's just something that we can fix if he goes to the right coach in the NFL. Arm strength. We both gave him a 4. I think this is 4 bordering on 5. The kid has a cannon. He
Mhm.
can whip it from like flat-footed. He can throw it off platform. He can do all sorts of things, but he has an absolute cannon. accuracy. Oh, by the way, we have identical grades on everything here, so we have
Yeah,
like no
it's crazy.
discrepancy here. We grade independently, and then we like talk about it later. But accuracy, we both give him a three. Average NFL accuracy. He does tend to miss receivers sometimes, and I think some of that is just the late throws and stuff. But for the
Yeah,
most
it's
part,
a mechanics thing.
it is it's a mechanical thing. He still has average accuracy, putting the ball in stride for most of his receivers. Release is definitely a five. Like quick. I mean, this is five bordering on 10. Like his release is one of the best I've ever seen in terms of how fast he gets that ball out of his hand. It's impossible to almost see it leave his hand. So
It's
that's
it's his
probably his best trait.
it's a superpower. And one thing I did look into, there's a lot. He was a big time basketball player and stuff like that. But I was like, did he play baseball? And I looked into it, and he was not in high school, but he played baseball all growing up. He was a
The Texas kid.
shortstop, and you
Yeah.
you can see the shortstop in him.
Touch, we gave him a three. Average, again, he struggles on some of those deep balls, but for the most part, he has average touch. Again, this is a reps thing, I think. I think he has
Mhm.
plenty of arm talent to get this right. Processing a three, average. I didn't think there was anything special about his processing, but I didn't see any deficiencies. How about you?
Yeah, no, occasional misses and stuff like that I wish he saw, and turning down his check downs early out, and things like that. More so, pre and post processing could, improve a little bit, but I thought it was fine.
Leadership, we both gave him a four. Outstanding leader. You could have given him a five here, the way
Yeah,
the team
it was
rallied around him.
close. Yeah.
Yeah.
I especially coming into, three different programs and, being embraced as a leader. I definitely could have gone a five. I debated it for sure.
Mobility, we both gave him a four. He's definitely above average and can use his legs to punish defenses, which will be an important feature of his game when he gets to the NFL level.
I'll
Resilience, go ahead.
I'll say, his mobility reminds me a lot of Patrick Mahomes. I don't love comping anyone to Patrick Mahomes, and I've seen it for him in general. And the only thing I'm going to comp to is as far as mobility is, these two guys are not the most athletic guys in the world. I don't think you're going to see if Cam Ward's probably not going to run the 40, but if he did run the 40, he wouldn't run a great time. But the way he destroys angles and how natural he is and his great feel as a rusher, it's very, very impressive, and it's so good for the level of athlete he is. He's much better of an improviser and a rusher than his athleticism should allow him to be.
Resilience, four. I think we talked about that. He bounces right back and he brings his team right back. That clutch gene is definitely a five in this kid. Fourth quarter production, you went over it. He's got it, much like Shedeur. Giants grade, we both gave him a four. Boone factor a four. When you put it all together, we both had identical scores, 3.7. So again, above average NFL quarterback, borderline Pro Bowl talent. I think that's where we land. Just slightly for you, identical to Shedeur. For me, slightly below Shedeur, but right there.
Yeah, it didn't break any tiebreakers for me. I was hoping to walk out of here with my QB1 and ended up with a 1A, 1B. So, yeah, I'm happy either way.
So our comp. Now I've seen this is interesting. We both had the exact same comp. I promise you we did not like cheat. We both like
Y-
wrote our comps and like we're like, holy shit, we have the same comp, which is a crazy comp. And I
Yeah,
promise
you
my
said it to me.
friends,
I'm like, that's where I was going to.
yeah. So I've heard all sorts. Let's talk about what people have been saying. They said he reminds them of Buddy in Green Bay.
Jordan Love,
Jordan Love. I think
Deshaun
there
Watson, I've
Deshaun
seen
Watson, a little bit of Kyler Murray in his place. People have said all those things. There's a little
Mahomes.
bit of all that, but I kept watching Cam Ward and saying I haven't seen a quarterback in recent history play quite this way with this level of production and success, and it reminded me of an older player, and that player, and you had the same comp, was Brett Favre.
Yep. Young Brett Favre.
Young Brett Favre coming out of Southern Mississippi. And just so you guys know, when we said Brett Favre, we went back and found old Brett Favre, whatever we could find from
Yeah.
Southern Miss on Brett Favre. We pulled it up in like grainy images and stuff. And if you can find it, take a look. There are a lot of similarities to how they play football. And if you read their scouting reports, it reads very similar. Like just incredible arm, can do anything on the field he wants, inconsistent mechanics, not sure what he's doing with the ball sometimes, but overall a great producer, a leader, a winner, all the same stuff, right? So young Brett Favre. And look, I mean, Brett Favre played that way his whole career. He never really fixed anything. He played that same loose style, and he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it's not a perfect comp. He's a very, very, very tough player to comp, but it was the one I liked the most. Looking, I hear all these people's comps. I'm looking at them. It's hard because for example, with like a Deshaun Watson and Jordan Love, these guys have a very pro style release and play very they have like their craziness to them, but they don't play like Caleb Williams, or not Caleb, sorry, Cam Ward does. Cam Ward just he's so nonchalant. He plays so loose. He plays his backyard football style and has these weird mechanics. And when you say those things, you think of Brett Favre. He was the original backyard football guy. He always had, especially earlier on in his career, had some really weird mechanics. Both have kind of that effortless arm strength. Favre definitely had more of a cannon than Ward does, but both very strong, effortless arms. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's some comparisons there.
Yeah, I'm Brett Favre had terrible mechanics. I mean, I'm old
Yeah,
enough
they
to
were really
remember.
bad.
And I actually watched him in real time because I'm old. But I remember Brett Favre, young Brett Favre in Green Bay was awful. Like he was a turnover machine. He was a mess. And I mean, he came out at a time where he's being compared to guys like Troy Aikman and Joe Montana and Steve Young, who were so fundamentally sound. And he just was bad, And then all of a sudden he put it together and he wins three straight MVPs, wins a Super Bowl, goes to two straight, has a Hall of Fame career, and had a long career playing that gunslinger football where like it didn't matter. Like his mechanics, none of that shit mattered. Like it was his playmaking ability that mattered. Right. So I think there is a world in which even if Cam Ward doesn't completely fix his mechanics, and I think it's a little bit pie in the sky to think he's going to fix everything about his mechanics, right?
Yeah,
But there's a world where he fixes it just a little, but he generally has the same play style, but he's still a highly productive, like Pro Bowl quarterback for many years. I think it's a reasonable comp. So there you have it. Our QB2, Cam Ward, very close to QB1, Shedeur Sanders, big upside player here, and our comp is young Brett Favre.
yep,
Which, yeah, and so that's when we're grading these top five, we have one, we have two, and then we have like a gap. Now
yeah,
the scoring is not a gap. I'll tell you
yeah,
right now, the scoring is not a gap, but there's a gap in terms of overall, prospect valuation here. But with that said, until we are going over QB3, and the last three guys, two of them may not enter the draft, but you know, but they're worth discussing until we know for sure. So QB3, in our as of now, right, is none other than Jaylen Milroe, quarterback from Alabama. 6'2", probably more like 6'1", 225 pounds, four-star recruit. He's a senior, the William Campbell Trophy Award winner. Um, this is an elite athlete. His production numbers we'll get to, but I mean, you have them up there. He has this year, he has 2,834, I'm sorry, 2,652 passing yards, 15 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. So that's kind of ugly with a 65.9% completion percentage. But he also has 719 rushing yards, 20 rushing touchdowns, and nine fumbles. So in total, he has 35 touchdowns and 19 for turnovers. He is a weapon. He is a weapon on the ground. But let's talk about what makes him QB3. This guy has the best arm, in my opinion, in this class in terms of pure arm strength. He has a cannon. Jaylen Milroe can sling it from anywhere on the field to anywhere else on the field without without any wasted motion, without any effort. He just can rip it. He can challenge every segment of the field, and he can really challenge it in a way where he excels throwing that deep ball with to speedy receivers, particularly outside the numbers. You saw it this year with Ryan Williams, who just hit the transfer portal, but you saw it with him and
Ryan
taking
Williams
advantage of.
didn't hit it. It
He
was the
did.
other. No, it was a different 5-star recruit. That was a bad information by someone on Twitter.
Is that true?
It was a
I
different
thought.
5-star.
Okay, well,
I'll double
all
check, but
right.
I'm pretty sure that's what I saw.
Okay. Um, in addition to his elite arm, the guy is the most explosive athlete in this class. He is a running threat, and he has the speed and burst of really an elite running back. Uh, Running is a huge part of his game. You see it in the production, but it's more than that. You watch on the film, he is he is the Jaden Daniels of this class when it comes to running ability, except he's a far more powerful runner. He's not going to get, hit with like the little coins coming out of his body, like like Jaden Daniels getting hit flying all over the field. This guy's strong, and he just breaks off runs with ease, and he takes off down the field and has enormous numbers of explosive plays. And defenses have to be honest. They have to be kept honest, taking account of his ability with his legs. He stretches the ball well in the vertical pass game. He's physical, and he's an outstanding leader. Like you see it, he's a leader of men out there. He's a general, and he leads that team. It's very obvious on the sidelines, very obvious here in the game. Um, there are cons to his game. I think as you can see from the stats, he's an underdeveloped passer and overly dependent on his running ability right now, and
Yeah.
that is a big problem when you're trying to talk about how he might project to the NFL next year. He does struggle when you take away his run game. If you have a defense that can neutralize him and you force him to stay in the pocket and run, that's where you see him struggle more. He has inconsistent footwork. Mechanics are not totally sound yet. I don't think he's a fully developed passer, and that's part of it. And he has a tendency when he does sit in the pocket to lock into that first read and throw the ball. He stares down his targets a lot. He's just an immature passer. That's kind of like the theme going on here. He doesn't tend to throw in the middle of the field. He avoids it. He goes to the sidelines a lot. Again, that's a sign of a poorly developed passer. The more developed passers routinely target the middle of the field. He doesn't do that at all. Um, and if there's anything that you can criticize about his running game, is that he's not elusive in the sense of, he has cutbacks and things like that. He's just the dude runs like an H back. Like he
Yeah.
grabs the ball and he's just a bulldozer.
He's
So
not
there's no
Lamar.
nuance. No, he's not Lamar. He really does run like, a guy like, honestly, like Daniel Jones,
Hmm.
maybe like Jalen Hurts. These guys who are just wrecking balls, like running down the field. Um, and when it comes to the processing stuff, again, it's just the same theme. He struggles recognizing defenses pre-snap. He struggles adjusting to post-snap rotations. So there are things that he has to work on from a passing perspective. But I'll stop there. What are your thoughts on Jaylen Milroe?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think you nailed it. He's a very, very special athlete. What you envision what Jaylen Milroe could become is very special. Going into this year, this was the guy I really wanted to see take that next step. And for a little bit, it looked like he might have, but he really started to regress, which was unfortunate because, I mean, this guy has a truly, truly elite arm as far as from arm strength goes. He's an elite athlete. I mean a special athlete. It looks like he's shot out of a cannon when he goes. When you look at some of the numbers, he had a 22.5 mile per hour on GPS in game. That roughly translates to about a 4.3. And I saw something a while back. I knew that was there as far as GPS numbers because I read something when Jahmyr Gibbs was on the roster in 2022. They asked, like, what kind of like athlete is Jahmyr Gibbs? What's his GPS numbers? Saw something. It was like, oh yeah, they're second best on the team. Really good. It's like, oh, who's best? Jaylen Milroe, above Jahmyr Gibbs. We know the kind of athlete that guy is. I mean, this guy is a special, special athlete, a rare one. And I'm not gonna go to our comp later, but yet because we'll get into it later. But I think it really talks about where he could make it in the NFL and what kind of game he has. But yeah, I think you nailed it all for the most part. I'll go into some of these high leverage situation stats like we've been talking on these other guys. So uh as far as his third and 7+ conversion rate, he had a 29.79, which is still like really good. That's still right up there with, the Caleb Williams, Drake Mays, Michael Penix's of the world. Still right around that 30% mark. It's very good. It's 3 out of 5 in this class. After him, there's a little bit of a drop off. His passer rating, that's not his main thing. He's a runner. Runner really where he succeeds. But his passer rating at 3rd and 7+, 88.52, which is 2 of 5 in this class. So really impressive that in high leverage situations, his passing has been successful. And then same with kind of his fourth quarter stats, 66.7 completion percentage, 544 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 110.25 passer rating. So, another guy who's very good in, high leverage situations, maybe not quite to the other guy's level, but very good. And honestly, very, very impressive the step that this guy took as far as handling pressure. This was a guy who was a disaster in 2023 handling pressure. He was, an average time of throw was well over 3 seconds. He had, I think his pressure to sack rate was like 28 or something like that. He has that down to 17.3. Very good. Time to throw 2.85. Again, it's very solid for a player. And then if you go into this QB own pressure stuff, he only has 11 on the year. That's 63rd in college football. He has 7 own sacks, which is a little bit, 7 in the 11 is a sack, 15th in college football. And then the percentage of pressure that was his responsibility, 13.4%, which is 78th in college football. So really impressive the way that he's, there's some stuff you compare his stats. He definitely took a step back in some senses. And, although he saw some flashes as a passer, it didn't quite correlate to the raw stats. It wasn't the jump you wanted to see in a lot of ways. But as far as working the pocket and handling pressure, big steps for Jaylen Milroe, which, that gives you some confidence to what he could be. That was something that a lot of people hung their hat on with, like an Anthony Richardson, was how well he handled the pocket. I don't think he's quite there, but he's working to a little bit where you saw with a guy like AR.
He had a 31.9% pressure to sack rate last year. I mean, that's horrible. That's 2023 Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito bad.
Yeah.
That's just to give you perspective. And now he's 17%, which is good. I mean, that's the better half, right? Under
Mm-hmm.
20% is really solid. So he's made big strides there. We could go into his passing depth information a little bit, I think, now, and just kind of give people a feel of what you're looking at, but it's not going to be the same pretty chart you saw with the other guys. I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to see lesser numbers here, a lot of inconsistencies, especially in the deep, in the deep throws. There's a lot of missed throws, especially to the left, in the middle of the field. His ratings drop off.
Mm-hmm.
His overall completion rates drop off. He doesn't have a lot of production in terms of touchdowns. Um, you know, he does tend to do a little bit better throwing to his right. I'm not entirely sure why that is on the intermediate and deep ball. Maybe he's just more comfortable there. Maybe that's where Ryan Williams is often lined up. I don't really know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of that.
Well,
Um,
that under 10 yards to the right, 43.9 NFL passer rating, 0 touchdowns, 2 picks.
because
That's
he
pretty
because
tough.
and that's because he locks onto those early reads and
Mm-hmm.
has thrown picks there, right? That's where he
Yeah.
like if his first read is a short throw to the right, he'll lock onto it almost pre-snap, and
Mm-hmm.
and the defense knows he's going there. Again, this is bottom line is these are ugly numbers, right? As a passer, there's no other way to look at it. It's acceptable, but when you're talking about a possible first round pick, these are ugly numbers. And
And
go ahead.
and you look at like the middle of the field there, only 60 passing attempts, only 31 passing attempts. You said it was well over 100 when we were looking. I know he has a little bit more volume in passing, but he did not use the middle of the field at the rate that you want it to be used.
No. And that's a little surprising because this year he had Kalen DeBoer as his head coach, and you thought that he was going to bring him that Kalen DeBoer offense that we saw Michael Penix run the last couple of years at Washington. Um, Certainly didn't look like that, despite the weapons at Alabama. They used his strength as a runner. We should kind of break down, the player that he is in terms of scoring, though,
Mm-hmm.
because the scoring does tell a little bit of a different story. And this is the difference between a prospect scoring and what you see, where this is where traits and athleticism can really push you up as a player.
Yeah.
Um, Mechanics, we both gave him a 2. I don't think we need to go over that too much. He has inconsistent footwork. He has inconsistent throwing motions. It needs work. He needs coaching.
It got
His
better, but it still needs work.
um, arm strength 5, cannon.
Absolutely.
Accuracy 3. Might have been generous here with the 3. I'll be honest. I felt like he did enough to earn a 3, but there were plenty of throws that he missed.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you feel about the accuracy overall?
Yeah, again, I think it was, it's hard to say what's mechanics and what's, you because it tends to be sloppy a lot, and I kind of led there, and I didn't feel like it was a disaster. I thought it
Yeah,
was probably on the lower side of that three, but I felt like it wasn't quite like really, it
wasn't his
wasn't
biggest
really,
problem.
yeah,
Right. Release, you gave him a three. I gave him a four. The only reason I gave him a four, I'll tell you right now, is because with minimal motion, he can just launch that ball like 70,
that's
80
fair.
yards. Yeah. Touch, we both gave him a three. I think that's again, that's a little bit of projection on that one. But he
Mm.
put enough plays on film with touch that you said, all right, the skill is there.
Yeah, it's tough because he's not like a guy who's like layering passes, but he is a guy who, when he's working, those vertical routes deep on the outside, he could throw with some excellent touch. I saw some even like throw with some anticipation. When he's on the outside of those numbers, you saw a different quarterback. He did some impressive stuff outside there.
That's fair. Processing, I think we both gave him a two. He definitely struggled to read defenses. I mean, there were some basic defensive looks he was being shown. He missed them.
Hmm.
This is an issue of pass reps, honestly, more than anything, and some coaching. Leadership, you gave him a five. I gave him a four. I could have given him a five here. I mean, he's a great leader. I think that's
Yeah.
obvious.
I love his leadership. I think, what I've seen with him on and off the field, him making like a mistake and he's like going over and like apologizing to receivers on the sideline. And they're like, bro, like you were like one of the main reasons we're here. Like, stop apologizing to us. And him, like, you see him with like the fans and like with kids. He's just so like, people gravitate to him, and that's what they say about him. So I love Bill, the leader.
Mobility, five. That's easy. The
Yeah,
guy's a
very
threat with
easy.
his legs. Resilience, four. Very, very resilient young man.
Hmm.
Lot of knock him down, get back up kind of stuff that he showed on tape in multiple games. Same reason he got a clutch factor of four. He was very good late in games, as you've mentioned. Like
Hmm.
very, very clutch. Was able to bring Alabama back multiple times in games. Giants grade, you gave him a two. I gave him a three. I think there's a lot of developmental upside there if this is the route they choose to go, and a goon factor of four. Overall, we both gave him a 3.6, which is, it's a higher than I would have expected score.
Yeah.
But if you look at what's driving it, it's his arm strength, it's his leadership, it's his mobility, and that clutch gene. Those are the four factors that are really driving that score. There are a lot of, you know, not so great factors, when it comes to him as a prospect. So to me, the overall score here, while it's good, does not tell you the whole picture. You got to look at the component parts. Um, at the end of the day, he's a developmental player. I think if he declares, this is the big issue. Alabama did not make the playoffs. He needed to make the playoffs. Alabama had to get in and he had to put on a show for me to feel confident that he was going to do enough to get a guaranteed first round grade from the advisory commission. Um, they didn't. His tape is his tape. It's done. 2024 is over. I'm not so sure he's declaring. If he does get a first round grade, he might. My opinion is Jaylen Milroe should absolutely go back to school. He needs reps as a passer. What do you think?
I agree. I think it would help him to go back to school. I don't know if he will though. I think that he's gonna bank on, what he is as far as an athlete and what people project him to be. Here's one thing to keep in mind. The longer he stays in school, the less you can project from him. That's the less people see him as a developmental guy. The longer, you know, suddenly he is a fifth year senior if he goes back to school. And it's harder to be like, that's a developmental guy at that point.
It is, but we see Cam Ward went back to school, right? He's a young man, but he put in the reps. Michael Penix went back to school, helped him out, made him a first round pick. A lot,
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Daniels,
He's got to show up.
and to be honest, they were better than him going into
Mm-hmm.
the year they went back. I mean, they were just better, but they were better players than him. Look,
Yeah.
I think you're right that if he declares, given this class where there's a gap after the first two quarterbacks in terms of NFL ready players and everybody else, and the number of quarterback needs that exist, there's a good chance somebody's going to swing on him. Probably in the first round. Somebody's probably going to make a first round swing. I think there's probably at least a 50-50 bet that somebody's going to say, I'm taking Jalen Miller in the first round. Just I want that talent in my room. But there's a chance that this guy falls, right? There really is a chance that people look at him and say, there's too much to fix here. We're definitely not taking a first round flyer on him. And if you get out of the first round as a quarterback, you can free fall. We've seen that time and time again. So I don't know if that's what his best interest, but if he does come out, we'll see. I don't think the Giants are likely to be in a position, barring them winning games down the stretch, to have to make this decision. You know, as long as they lose out, they will not have to worry about this problem. But if they win a game or two, this is going to be an issue. If Jalen Milroe's in the draft, so he's an interesting guy to talk about. Um, Comps.
Yeah. So
Why don't you go for the comp? Because I didn't add anything because your comp was perfect.
yeah, and so I'm just going to preface with this kind of to lead us into that. It's clear that why we'd have Shedeur and Cam Ward as QB1s, but these numbers are similar for a reason, and it's just because of the projectable upside and what he brings. And the right team, for the right team, not a lot of situations are great, but for the right team, Jaylen Milroe could go in there and be a guy who you can win with. And another guy like that, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is our comp for Milroe. He's Jalen Hurts with a lot more explosiveness, both in his arms and his legs. But that's a guy who goes to a different situation. You probably don't see the same Jalen Hurts you do to that. He went to I think Jalen Hurts is a guy you can win with, and I think you can win with him because he went to a very good situation to play to his abilities, and I think he has high ceiling abilities, and I think it's similar to Jalen Milroe. If you have a guy who capitalized on his athleticism, his ability to throw outside the numbers, that's a big thing. Jalen Hurts has a lot of issues throwing, over the middle of the field, but he is an excellent quarterback outside the numbers. And Milroe is the same way. And the way he uses athleticism just changes how defenses play you. If you have the receivers and the offensive line, he gives you more than the average quarterback gives you in a good situation. He's a guy who brings a lot of high upside to it and can play with any of these top quarterbacks in the league if he gets in the right situation and develops correctly. There's a very good chance that if he goes to a bad spot, I think it ruins him. You never really see Jalen Milroe. But if you're the right team, I definitely look at this in a similar situation. Give them some time. I'm going to build up a situation to Detroit Lions, for example, something like that. Seattle Seahawks, a team that can give them a little bit of time and build a good situation for them. I think would be great. But yeah, Jalen Hurts. And I actually been on the Hurts one a little bit for a while, but that's comp's been around. Brugler actually had a great write up on similar comp, and just it went beyond what we talked about, but just so many parallels where they both grew up like outside of Houston. They both went to Alabama, like to start their career, and things along those lines. There's a lot of parallels here, and
Yeah,
I could see
yeah.
it.
So I mean, as long as he transfers to play for Lincoln Riley at USC for a year
Yeah,
and puts up
yeah.
4,000 yards
There you
passing, then
go.
he's Jalen Hurts, right? Because that's what Jalen Hurts did, right? He left Alabama when he lost his job to Tua, goes to play 1 year under Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, and has a really good passing season. He threw for like 3,800 yards and 30 touchdowns or something like that. He put on tape the ability to be somebody who beats you with his arm. You already knew what he could do with his legs. And then he was still drafted in the second round. I think it was like number pick 50 or something like that, right? Um, that's kind of what you could see from Milroe, right? Now, times have changed. Guys like Milroe are valued more now. Like that high floor prospect as a runner gets taken earlier. So if he declares this year, what kind of offense does he go to that benefits him? Personally, I think he needs to sit. I think he absolutely needs to sit. I don't think he should be playing football next year in the NFL because he needs to develop. But then again, he needs reps. So he really should go back to college. But let's say he's taken in the NFL. If a bad team in the top 10 or top 15 does take him, there is going to be a big pressure to put him out there because chances are that bad team has a bad quarterback, and they're going to struggle to put up points and win games, and they're going to know that at minimum Jaylen Milroe on the field will move the ball. At minimum, he will move the ball with his legs, and maybe they design a short passing game for him, but they may stunt his development. There's a lot of risk here for Jaylen Milroe's development. I'm not saying his money or anything like that, just his development as a player. But I can see a team taking him and using him that way. Um, if he decides to declare. Again, my personal preference for Milroe would be, and I usually tell, my usual stance is if you're getting a first round grade as a kid, just go, right? Just go to the NFL, take the money, because that first round money is guaranteed. But if there's any chance you're not a first rounder with this level of talent and that this much development needed, I really feel like Jalen Milroe is best suited going back to school, either at Alabama or hitting the transfer portal and going somewhere else to develop as a passer. But he needs to develop as a passer and put up I mean, if he stays in Alabama, I'd like to see him throw for 3,500 yards next year or 4,000 yards next year. I'd like to see him use his legs almost as a last resort. I know what he can do with his legs. I need to see what he can do with his arm. But if he does declare, he probably is QB3 in this class.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. Agree with everything there.
All right. Let's go to QB4. Why don't you introduce him? And this is
Yep.
where we had a little bit of controversy, but some of you will be surprised, the last two here, but go ahead, QB4.
All right. So with QB4, we're going with Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss. 6'2", 225 pounds. He was a 4-star recruit. He's a senior. And so go some of his stats this year. Really impressive stats. I mean, this guy is a total like data darling, like 68.6 completion percentage, 3,875 passing yards, 25 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 10.7 yards per attempt, 177.7 quarterback rating, 452 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 fumbles. And, if anybody watching this video, you can see the screen here. I mean, the data loves him. The data loves Jackson Dart. If you went just off the data, you'd be like, wow, this guy's like QB1. And I've heard people go there, but I think Jackson Dart's a good quarterback, but he's not as good as the data says he is. So we'll go into a little bit of that. I'll kind of give you my thoughts on Jackson Dart. Let's just start. He's a physically talented quarterback. He has really good arm strength. He's a guy who can, throw a ball from with these wide hashes in college. He can be on the far hash and make a throw outside the numbers. He has that type of arm strength. He can really put it anywhere on the field and then do a little bit more than you typically expect a guy to. Is really good arm strength. And he's impressive as a runner. He has a little bit of improv ability. He's really good with, is as a power runner. You can really, stick his shoulder down and, get a first down. His helmet will come off every single time because I don't think he has a chin strap. I saw his helmet fly off about 9 times watching his tape, but he is a good runner. And but on the other things, I thought he thrived in like 50-50 balls. I thought, he had really good ball placement on that and, gave an opportunity where he converted them at a lot higher than a 50% rate, which, really good for that type of stuff. His guys could make plays. And I thought, he was very efficient using the middle of the field. The offense didn't ask him to do it a lot, but he was efficient when he did do it. Now let's talk some of the cons. I thought I didn't love his mechanics and didn't love his decision making. Start out with some of the mechanics. I didn't love his feet in the pocket. He kind of had what people call like happy feet. He kind of bounces around, and I felt like it could lead to him like not stepping correctly with his foot, and he kind of bailing on the pocket early. That's the type of stuff you see when you have those guys who kind of bounce around. I don't know, there's different reasons people do it, but it's something you kind of need to clean up. Let's see. I thought he struggled with some of his touch passes, especially like on, the deeper plays, although he was a good 50-50 guy, Oh, he really overthrew or underthrew and everything in between on when he tried to go deep to these guys. Those are really inconsistent. Let's see. I felt like he would he would panic and leave a pocket too early. I felt like he made some really bad mistakes at times what doing that. Uh yeah, I mean, just other things like just small things like every single time he took the ball, you saw him like kind of like spinning the ball. It's just a sign of kind of like bad mechanics there. Uh Overall, like he did impress me. I think this is a guy who you could bring in the NFL, and I think this is a guy who could start a season or two in the NFL, maybe more. Maybe he's a guy who surprises and becomes a legitimate NFL starter. But I think at one point in time, you might see Jackson Dart starting for a team, even if it's just for half a season. I think that's something you could see. He is definitely looks more like an NFL quarterback than these guys I typically see outside of a first round player. But why don't you tell me some of your thoughts on Jackson Dart?
Yeah, I mean, you got most of the stuff here. I mean, I think what you Jackson Dart is a frustrating watch, mainly because, as you said, the data loves him, and we thought about putting him in our second episode because we were going to make it like a whole data darling episode because there's not a lot separating these guys, but when Jackson Dart start, if you guys remember, for those of you who are college football junkies, the first 3 4 weeks Jackson Dart was tearing up college football, and he was putting up these crazy numbers, and people were like, "Oh my God, all you Monte and Sal lied to us. This is a great QB class. Look at Jackson Dart." And I said, "Look at who he's playing. Like just wait till he gets to the real teams in a few weeks and see how he does." Sure enough, like it's not like he did horribly, but he came back down to earth pretty quickly, right? And kind of showed that he's a very average type quarterback. Um, there are things he does very well, right? I think the number of reps he's gotten in college has helped him. I think that when he's operating quick game, when you watch him operate quick game, he does it really well. I mean, the ball releases quickly out of his arm, and
Mm-hmm.
he can sling it really in that short area, either behind the line of scrimmage, on screen passes, or slants, and throws to the flat in that 0 to 10 range. He can really flip. He can sling that thing quick, get the ball out, keep the chains moving. I thought he was pretty decent when he was challenging middle of the field. I think he has a good arm, and I mean, he has that tendency to beat tight windows, so he can fit it into tight window throws. And
Yeah.
he has a little bit of a gunslinger mentality there, right? Where he wants to try to do that, does a good job at it. Um, but you mentioned a lot of the cons, which is, his feet. I told you, like watching Jackson Dart throw the ball, it's like you're watching Isaiah Pacheco run the football while trying to throw the football, right? Like you guys know how Isaiah Pacheco runs with his legs moving like Fred Flintstone all the time, Like that's how Jackson Dart plays football. Like his legs don't freaking stop moving. He never
Mm-hmm.
sets and throws properly.
Mm-hmm.
His feet, he gets happy feet all the time. And he tends to break good pockets because of that, right?
Yeah.
He'll have a good pocket and he'll leave it. And when he leaves it is when you give him a ding on his processing because you're like, if you just stayed in the pocket for an extra second, which you had, you'd see somebody coming wide open down the field. And he just doesn't see it because he's running around. So, there are things about his game that are just inconsistent. But what he has really, if you can simplify his game to just like use your arm talent, get the ball out quick, use your legs, you're a good runner. You have a pretty good NFL player, I think. There is a floor here of a good NFL player. He will be a scheme dependent quarterback, unlike I think the top two guys that we talked about. Jackson Dart is 100% a scheme dependent quarterback. If you put him in a scheme where you're asking him to hold the ball and let plays develop deep and have him set and stand under fire and make plays, he'll fail. He'll
Yeah.
fail. But if you ask him to run a quick game and throw in that short to intermediate area with timing, I think he has plenty of arm to do that, and he has the ability. So I think he's a guy. Personally, I think we talked about this. Like he's the kind of guy I can see going to the Rams, right,
Yeah.
or the Niners. Like this is your developmental quarterback in that West Coast timing offense, where you can get him for cheap and see if he's got something. I think that's kind of where I see him. But I think what the biggest problem I have with Jackson Dart, the biggest problem I have is that unlike our top two guys, this guy folds. Crumbles
So bad.
under pressure. Under pressure in late game situations, he crumbles. Like it just unplayable bad. Team, he's not a leader out there. He's not clutch out there, and his team loses. And that's not something I want to see from a guy who has as much college experience as he has. And I'm not sure that can be fixed. So those are my thoughts on Dar. Do you want to go into some of his passing metrics?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the, what you were saying there with kind of his, high leverage stats that we've kind of gone with these other guys, and it really can be bad with him there. Is third and 7 conversion rate, that one's not that bad. 29.73, that's 4 out of 5, but a little bit closer. It's kind of like in the Milroe territory. That's not terrible. Now, the issue is his quarterback passer rating on 3rd and 7 plus. That's last out of the group with 63.01. So although he converts at a decent rate, he has some really bad numbers and makes some mistakes while doing that too. He can completely fold at times in those high leverage situations. And then I think the scarier one here is his fourth quarter stats. If you look at his fourth quarter stats, and I can read those off in a second here. I'll just give you what is fourth quarter stats, and we can kind of look at some of his other quarters. So fourth quarter stats: 57.1 completion percentage, 412 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions for a 74.4 passer rating. Now, just for comparison here, his other quarters, he had 1,195 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception for 178.11 passer rating the first quarter. 1,309 yards, 12 touchdowns, 0 interceptions in the second quarter for 209.6 rating. Third quarter, 959 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, 174.78. And you can see in the fourth quarter, this man falls apart. He is struggled. And then if you even go to overtime, he was only there once, 3 attempts, 0 completions. So this is a guy who in high leverage situations it just completely crumbles.
He's the perfect candidate for quarterback by committee. You leave him until halftime, and then you yank his ass and put somebody
Yeah.
else in. I mean, that's the thing with Jackson Dart. He's not a complete quarterback right now, and I don't know if he's going to get that clutch gene ever. It was disappointing to watch him crumble like that in those big game spots. He was crying on the sideline in one of the games. I forgot which game it was, but he fell apart. He's
In Joe
crying
Judge's lap.
in Joe Judge's. I mean, look, and I'm not trying to make fun of somebody who's upset, but
Yeah.
you're the freaking starting quarterback of Ole Miss. Like you can't be crying in your coach's lap in the middle of the game. That's insane. It was not good to watch. I'm sure scouts saw that and were like, "What the hell?" And then you match the stats. It looks bad. But look, just based on traits, production, if you don't mind pulling
Yeah.
up the depth stuff right now, you can see he's a pretty good passer, at different levels of the field. I mean, like again, the data likes him. It likes him a lot. He's pretty consistent all around. Um, Challenges the deep hash, challenges outside the number as well. Now, this is the one thing I'll say about this offense, which might be both a something that boosts up his numbers and may limit his potential. The Lane Kiffin offense is very similar to the to the Heichel offense at Tennessee, where you're
Mhm.
running a lot of wide sets with the receivers well outside those wide hash marks, and you're just using a big field and everything is to the outside, which does, it strains the defense, and it really is designed to open up running lanes, but it does make life a little harder for a quarterback, especially if he's a guy who I think has a tendency to be more of a middle of the field type thrower. So I wonder how he would have looked in a different offense, right? Could he perform better, especially in late game situations?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, you look at here at some of these like middle of the field numbers, they're very efficient, very good. 40 53, 822 yards, 8 touchdowns, 1 interception, 58 for 69, 638 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. But the thing is, we're talking like that between the numbers, under 10, and you had Shedeur and Cam Ward over 100, and with Milroe, it kind of made sense because there's a lot of running from him, not that it was passing, but Ole Miss throws the ball a shit ton. and it shows up on tape when you watch it. It's just like I'm like, I think this guy's pretty good over the middle field. Like I'm waiting so I can like evaluate. I'm like, nope, nope, nope. They're just throwing outside every single time. And I don't think they were playing to the best of his ability. I know like the numbers were good, but as far as like what I think would have been a more efficient offense, I think playing the middle of the field would have been better for
There's a chance if he goes through the right system in the NFL, he's a better pro than he is a college player because I think NFL systems are more leaning now towards a McVay, Shanahan type tree where you've got a lot of middle of the field concepts. And, Kevin O'Connell, for example, um, he might be productive there. I'm not saying this guy's a franchise quarterback. I'm just saying there's a world in which he can be a solid quarterback, a productive quarterback, and a guy who has a long NFL career, maybe as a backup and a journeyman, but somebody who's there for a while. Um, Beyond that, we might as well just go to the scores quickly on him. Our grading system for Jackson Dart. We have yeah, we do have identical grades here. And we can just rip through them quickly. Average mechanics, he gets a 3. He has a good arm, so we both gave him a 4. Accuracy is average, we gave him a 3. Release is very good. He has a quick release. He gets a 4 from both of us.
it.
His touch throws leave a lot to be desired in this offense, so he gets a 2. He's below average there. Processing, we gave him a 3. I think his pre-snap processing was fine. I think post-snap there were some issues. Again, I don't know how much of that was the offense, but average. Leadership, gave him a 3. I could have given him a 1 here, honestly, with the crying. To be honest, there's no T
Yeah.
one T. Our friend is here. There's no crying in football. I agree. Um, Mobility, he's a good runner. He's a weapon with his legs. He's a 4. Resilience, average is 3. Clutch, again, we gave him a 2. I think we might be being generous here.
Yeah.
It could be a 1 here,
Yeah.
but we
It
gave him a
could
2.
be.
Giants grade 3 as a developmental player if you want to take somebody on day 3, which is where we
Hmm.
have him graded. And Goon Factor, I gave him a 3, you gave him a 4. Um, you gave him player comp of Zach Wilson. It's
Hmm.
not a bad one. Um, I thought long and hard about my comp. I came up with another Jets quarterback to be generous. I think there's a little bit of Sam Darnold at USC in this guy's game.
Okay.
Um, there's a world, and just like Sam Darnold struggled in a more complex offensive scheme when he years later when he got to Kevin, Shanahan and then O'Connell, he found his niche as a middle of the field thrower, right? And nobody's going to mistake Sam Darnold at this point in his career for one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL, despite being the second overall pick. I'm sorry, the third overall pick. How could I say that? Um, but uh, but there's a world in which now Sam Darnold looks like he might have a very long, healthy NFL career in the right system as a system-dependent quarterback. I can see the same kind of future for Jackson Dart here, but there's no way in hell he's going third overall. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, right now, this guy is, I would say, a fourth round player, maybe a fifth round player. What do you think?
I think he could go day 2. I think I think I'd take him day 2. I think like if I was like not for the Giants necessarily, because I don't think like we should be waiting that there, but like I think he's a guy who can start football games. And I don't think you find a lot of those outside of the round 1 typically. I mean I like him better than anybody after the top 6 last year. I like him better than I liked Rattler or
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
like Pratt. I think he's a guy who can start football games, even if he's not ever going to be like a full time starter. But
Let's
I
talk.
think he can be a bridge type guy long term in this league.
So let's talk through the Giants scenario. Let's say these idiots win a game somehow and they fall to like eighth, right?
Hmm.
Let's say they get a new regime and they're like, we're not trading up to get a quarterback. We're going to take Mason Grant or
Hmm.
whatever, right? Um, Abdul Carter, somebody like that in the first round. And they're just building up the roster with a new regime. Day 2 comes. Are you pulling the trigger on Jackson Dart in the second round? Are you waiting till the third? Like we're like I mean I'm just you have to get a quarterback. So
Yeah.
so are you waiting for somebody else, or are you saying I'm going to use a day 2 pick like in the second round because that's an early pick. The earliest I would do for the Giants is probably earliest would be like third round with a trade down. I don't know what you think, but
Yeah, I'd probably wait to the third round because I just don't see the upside of him like being a franchise quarterback. But I do think it also makes almost more sense to take a guy like him than take a guy who's a total project because I don't know if we're in position to really develop a total project while I think a guy like Dart's a guy you could sit for 6 games, and I think you could see what you have. I don't think he's so far away that he couldn't play year one. So, but I agree with you. I'm probably like third round for him.
But you also need the right coach and the right scheme. Like I'm not
Hmm.
touching him unless I have personally. I've seen enough Jackson Dart where I wouldn't let him touch, a Kiffin style offense ever again. I
Hmm.
would want him, and not that you would see it in the NFL, but you know what I mean. Like a vertical offense is not his strength.
Yeah.
I would want a coach who has a McVay offense, a Shanahan offense, where you're using middle of the field, short to intermediate area a lot. You're using the run game because one thing we didn't talk about a lot of, which is a strength of his is he's very good in play action. He's good
Yeah.
in that kind of a game. So if you have a middle of the field game that's reliant on the run game, so he's got to be run game dependent, scheme dependent as a passer. But if you have that kind of game, right, one of those tree guys, um, I can be more comfortable taking a swing on him. Otherwise, I'm comfortable not taking a swing at all on Jackson Dart. If I've got a Brian Dable offense, I want no part of Jackson Dart.
Yeah. I definitely hear that. Um, yeah, man, he's interesting. I'll say, one other thing one other comp that like I went over and I didn't end up going with because of the high leverage stuff and they're the total opposite with it. But you know, he I think Jackson Dart goes to a different situation, has a better coach. He goes to Michigan. He might look a little bit like JJ McCarthy did there. Does he not there's polar opposites from the high leverage situation, but
You pissed me off so much when you texted me this. Uh, well, I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
like when you look at the struggles, they struggle with the touch passes. They have like a very very good arm, not elite. Like can work. Like I think I would be successful in the middle of the field. Good athleticism. I think that there's similarities to them there. But Jackson Dart did not get the coaching he needs. He still needs a lot. While JJ McCarthy will have he was so refined with a lot of that stuff.
I don't think Jim Harbaugh taught JJ McCarthy how to have ice in his veins in big
Yeah,
moments.
not that part. Yeah,
I think that, like, again, I personally believe that's an innate trait, right?
I
Like
agree.
guys who have that, they have that. Shedeur has it, Cam has it, JJ had it, Jaden Daniels had it, Michael Penix had it. These guys had it.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if I can make that comment, but I know what you're saying from a stylistic standpoint. I get it. All right. Speaking about Giants fits, let's go to QB5. So QB5 is our traits QB, and I'll introduce him. So none other than the illustrious Drew Aller from Penn State University. Another guy who I'm not sure is declaring. We're going to have to see. Let me just pull up his stuff here real quickly. So Drew Aller is the one guy who is the outlier in this group. Everybody else in this class is 6'2", 225, just about. Drew Aller is 6'5", 235. He was a five-star recruit, QB1 in his high school class. He's a true junior. Um, his stats very quickly this year. He has a 69% completion percentage, 2,894 yards passing, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He averaging 8.9 yards per attempt with 161.2 passer rating. He has 279 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, 3 fumbles. He was a basketball player and a baseball player in high school. Um, he Drew Aller he's your prototype, right? He's your physical prototype of a quarterback that, the traditional quarterback people talk about. You see comps to guys like Josh Allen, based on his size, Ben Roethlisberger. These are the kind of comps you hear for Drew Aller. He has that prototypical ideal frame and size of an NFL quarterback. He has the durability factor that Bill Walsh talks about because of his size and physical presence. And he has one of the biggest arms in this class, probably second only to Jaylen Milroe in terms of raw arm strength. He has incredible velocity, throwing it on platform, off platform, doesn't matter. He whips that thing and it explodes off his arm. He has improved his mechanics. Last year, when you watched him, he was a disaster. He was objectively terrible. His mechanics have noticeably improved with the new offensive coordinator this year. And he's definitely slowed down his footwork, which has improved him a lot. He's cleaner with it. His throwing motion is more replicable, rep after rep. He's got a smooth, fluid release. He's quick. He's compact. The balls comes out quick. No wasted motion. Where he thrives right now is middle of the field. He's a very good middle of the field passer. He hits guys in stride over the middle of the field. Time and time again, you see him make big plays to his tight end, who's one of the best, if not tight end one of the better tight ends in this class, and Warren. You see him make a lot of great throws to his running backs out of the backfield in stride over the middle of the field. That's where he lives. And he's pretty good at avoiding pressure in the pocket. He senses it, he slides away, he moves around, he finds throwing lanes. He can also use his legs. He's a good runner. He's not an elite runner, but he's a very good runner where he can be a threat with his legs and he threatens defenses that way. He can play off script. He's a big, strong athlete. Not much else there. I mean, like you're talking about a physical prototype, struggles and negatives. There's quite a few. He's not a very good passer right now. Not other than those like middle of the field throws where he's hitting guys in stride. If he's throwing the ball with touch deep, he's underthrowing guys routinely. He's overthrowing them. He's throwing the ball to the tuba player, as our friend 1T says, for no reason whatsoever. When there's a guy running open right down the sideline, his deep ball is not very good. His touch passes struggle. Um, he's not an advanced passer yet. He has a very limited passing repertoire that is honed in despite the big arm. He does tend to have very inconsistent ball placement. Like there are times where he forces his receivers to stop, come back to the ball. That's frustrating to watch because they're running wide open sometimes. Um, and he's all arm right now. There's not a lot of nuance to his game. It's just power in his arm. The biggest knock on him, though, is he's not a mature processor of the game. He doesn't read defenses well, both pre and post snap. He tends to struggle. Some of that stuff is harder for us to tell, but it's very clear he's confused out there on too many plays. He's not quite ready yet. To me, the bottom line is Drew Allar is your prototypical physical specimen, has a lot of physical upside, some athletic upside, big arm, but he's not there yet as a quarterback. He has a lot of quarterback refining and development to do. As a passer right now, if you ask him to come into the NFL, I think you're gonna have somebody who struggles a lot. What are your thoughts on Drew Allar?
Yeah, man. I think you nailed basically all of it on Drew Allar. Um, you know, I'll just kind of add to what we're talking about is one thing that kind of doesn't make me want to take the chance on him as much is I do think he gets a little bit overrated as an athlete. I think he has a very, very good arm, but I don't like he gets like Josh Allen comps. I don't think his arm's nearly there. And
No,
then people talk about like his athleticism, and I think he has enough. I think he can, go get those first downs, and he's a powerful guy. Like he's not anything special as an athlete. I think he's an okay athlete. He's very good for his size. He's got the prototype. It's more about the prototypical size to me with a big arm than it is, the athleticism. But he definitely has enough. Um, I wanted to touch a little bit. Again, we'll finish off the last of the high leverage rates here. For 3rd and 7 plus, he was the worst out of the group by far. 25.81. So, I mean, that's basically like 12% less than the next guy. Really, really big hit there. 5 out of 5 of the group. As far as passer rating, 80.31 on 3rd and 7 plus, 4 out of 5 of the guy. And then again, not great fourth quarter stats, 57.4 completion percentage, 340 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, a 76.5 passer rating. So, in high leverage situations, the numbers really aren't there. I'll say he's pretty decent as far as not causing his own pressures. I'll say that. I'll touch on those. QB own pressures, 14. It's 42nd in college football. 7 of those were sacks, which is 15. So that's not as good, but it's decent. His pressure of responsibility, 14.4. It's 70th in the country. So, not a guy who's causing a lot of his own pressures, not Daniel Jones-esque in any of that in that sense at all. He is a guy who I think is on a good trajectory. I think this is a guy who has improved a lot each year in college football, and I think he has NFL traits. Like I said, I think people go a little bit too far with it sometimes, but he is a plus athlete in like every way, which is a good thing. And he's a guy who, if you look at some of like these numbers on the screen here, he had a, was it 70.7 pressure grade? That's one of the best in the country. Very good with pressure in his face, despite those high leverage numbers. So, that is a big positive for him. And, it's only a 10.7 pressure to sack rate. I mean, that kind of goes into what I was saying about him causing those pressure. Really good at handling in the pocket. I think that this is a guy who I'm keeping my eye on if he goes back to college. I don't think he's a guy who I would take early in the draft if he came out this year. He's not ready enough, and he's not as much of a high upside guy as like a Milroe or anything like that. He's NFL would like him; they would take him. Sure, he would go day two. Wouldn't be a huge fan, but if he goes back to school, I do think that there's a world that Drew Allar is like fighting for QB1 next year. He needs to take a big step, but you can see improvement every single year. There's a gradual improvement for him, and he has the traits. He has some of the the smaller things that you want to do well, the pocket presence and things like that. Maybe year 4 is the year of Drew Allar, and he becomes that guy. But as of today, there's too many issues for me to look past.
I would love to see the chart now, just
Yep.
to see where we are in terms, just to see that, just so everybody here at home watching this can see what we see in terms of the type of player he is all over the field, because I think it does tell a decent story for him. So you look across the board, it's very inconsistent. There
Yeah.
were guys we went over today who very consistent grades at different levels. You could identify where they had a weakness. Drew Allar's chart is all over the place. Like his spray chart is just wild. Like just for example, you go to the deep ball, right? Between the numbers, deep ball, 13 of 19, 462 yards, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, 150.8 NFL passing rating. Those are great numbers. Throwing to his left, 2 of 9, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 41 yards, 43 rating. Going to his right, 4 of 9, 136, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 88 rating. Makes no sense, right? Uh, just over the middle, elite, everywhere else, horrible. Go down in the middle of the field, go down to the intermediate range. Again, middle of the field, he's quite good. We've mentioned that. 29 to 49 in the 10 to 20 range, 596 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 119.1 NFL rating. Very good. Go to the left in the intermediate range, 12 of 27, 219, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, 85 rating. Very pedestrian. Go to the right, intermediate range, 12 of 21, 178, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 96 rating. Very pedestrian. Go even when you bring it back to the short passing, 0 to 10, the same picture. In fact, it gets worse, which is shocking. Like it's worse in the middle of the field in the short area. 63 of 76, 565, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 109 rating. That's not great for that part of the field, but it's I mean, in touchdowns it is, but the rest of it is not. Go to the right, 14 of 19, 125, no touchdowns, 1 interceptions, 69 rating. And on the left, 21 of 26, 160, no touchdowns, no interceptions, 92 rating. A lot of inconsistencies, right? He's clearly best over the middle at every level, but inconsistent when going to the right, going to the left, trying to throw a touch. And we talked about this. He struggles throwing the ball with touch. He struggles with the deep ball. He struggles processing and letting plays develop. To me, this just reads like a guy who's not there yet. Again, this is a guy who's just not a developed passer. Like you said, he's making progress. This is not a spray chart I want to see as an NFL evaluator. If you're telling me I'm drafting on traits only, that's a different discussion. If you're telling me I'm drafting a quarterback ready to play within the next year or two, this looks like a disaster.
Yeah, man. And I think you're looking here. And I think what really, brings us home is you don't see like the same like multiple interceptions in one area. You see them all around in different spots. I'm looking at my chart. I don't know what happened here, but he's supposed to have 5 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in that middle 10 plus. I don't know why the chart changed a little bit, but it's mostly the same. It's like that's the only difference I can see. But maybe it left off the conference championship or something, and in this one, maybe this was regular season only. But regardless, Yeah, you can kind of look at this and you see that there is not a consistency of one area he struggles with. He's misses in different spots. He makes mistakes in different spots. There's some spots that aren't great, but that's kind of the case of it. It's not a one weakness. It's a like a random sporadic mistake type of thing.
Let's go to his R scoring system on Allar. So mechanics, we both gave him a 3. I think that's a 3 trending up is what I would say. It was like a 1 to 2 last year. He's moved up to 3, which is good on him
Yeah.
with better coaching. Arm strength, you gave him a 4. I gave him a 5. I can see why you gave him a 4. I thought about going back to a 4. I think he has a big enough arm where he's not far off from the better arms in the NFL already.
Hmm.
So I gave him that 5. But accuracy, 2.
Yeah.
Well below average. Two heading towards 1,
Yeah.
honestly.
Especially when you factor in just how bad he is leading receivers and stuff like that.
Release, 4. Definitely has an effortless quick release to get the ball out, so that's in his favor. Touch, 2. Again, bordering on 1. Terrible with touch passes. Processing, definitely a 2. Not good. Below average. Leadership, I thought he was pretty good. I thought he got better as the season went on. His tape improved, which was a good sign. So we gave an average a 3. Both gave him a 3. Mobility, we both gave him a 4. He's definitely a weapon in the run game just because he's big and he's got enough speed where he can challenge defenses. Is he an elite runner? No. But he is a threat, right? He runs like a tight end. Like he forces missed tackles, right? In fact, his running style is not that different from Drake May. I thought, like there are a lot of
Hmm.
similarities. Drake May wasn't like this elite runner in the sense of like having like juke ability and stuff, but Drake May was a guy that once he took off, like guys bounced off him. He was hard to bring down. I think Drew Aller is definitely hard to bring down. That's just being 6'5", 230.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I think we're underplaying Drake May a little bit, but I hear where you're coming from.
just stylistically,
Yeah,
he is nothing like
I know.
Drake
I
May.
just mean as a
Don't get
runner,
me wrong.
but I hear
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Resilience, you gave him a 3. I gave him a 4, and the reason I gave him a 4 was because of the Big Ten title game. I thought
Hmm.
he came back well in that game in a big
That's
spot. I
fair.
gave him an extra spot there. I was going to give him a 3. I watched the game. I respected the way he fought in that game. I didn't
No,
think he
that's
had the
fair.
great. I definitely didn't think he had this great game that everybody else thought he had, but I respected his fight. So I gave him a 4 there. I think in a big spot there it mattered. Clutch factor, average, a 3. I think that was brought up again for me by the Big Ten game,
Yeah,
Big
I
Ten
think it
title
could
game.
have gone to 2 just based
Yeah,
off the numbers.
you could have, but again, in the biggest spot, he actually did a decent
Yeah,
job.
so a little
Um,
bump.
little ball. Giants grade. I gave him a 3 as a developmental player. You gave him a 2 for now, and I can see why.
Yeah,
Um,
I get Milroe too. I just don't see a developmental being the right fit for us right now.
Fair enough. And a 3 on Goon Factor. So you gave him a 3.0. I gave him a 3.2. And the only places I differed were in resilience and arm strength. Otherwise, we had
Hmm.
very similar scores. Bottom line to us is, for a guy with his physical traits, he should be more. And
Hmm.
at best right now, he's trending towards a middle of the pack to bottom tier NFL starter, right? At this point. He needs a lot of development before he gets there. So he's another one. I think this guy should go back to school. 100%. He should go back to school. But his team is going to the college football playoff,
Yeah,
unlike Jaylen Milroe. In fact, I just pulled up the schedule and they are playing against SMU, DK's favorite team, on December 21st in the first round. They will be favorites in that game. If the favorite wins, you're going to see Drew Aller play 1 game in the playoff, and then you'll see him play Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl the week after. So he'll have 2 games. There's a chance that Penn State beats Boise State because Penn State's team is better than Boise State's team. Boise State has the best player on either team, but again, just the way the bracket rolls out, there's a chance you get him for 1 game. There's a decent chance you get him for 2 games. And there's a decent chance he goes to the semifinal game, in which case he'll face somebody from the winner of the Georgia bracket. So it's going to be Georgia, Notre Dame, or Indiana. There's a chance you get 3 more games of Drew Allar. I don't think he'd go past that personally. He could, but he may have a lot more tape to put on. There's a world in which Drew Aller shows up in the playoffs system and goes crazy, right? We've seen this. Guys in clutch moments show up and he gets better and better and better. And if he does that with his traits, he's going to get first round grades. He will
Yeah.
get first round grades, and he'll probably declare at that point, I think. But
Yeah.
I think right now he should probably go back to school. Um,
I'll
Comps.
say.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Last thing I'll say about that. I'll say I've heard from some people who are a little bit clued into Penn State that they expect him to be back. That they're pretty confident he's back. But like you said, it's hard. It's hard for me to feel like they should be that confident when there's so much in the air right now. Like a good playoff performance could change that completely. So, I will be watching closely.
He almost beat
Hammond
Oregon.
Milroe's not even in it. I wasn't even thinking. So literally, Allar is the only guy. Oh, there's Ewers if he doesn't get benched for Arch.
Arch.
I'm trying to think if there's anybody else is like that we should be talking about that's in this. Obviously, Ewers didn't make this episode, but
Well, Riley Leonard, obviously.
yeah, that's true. But
Beck is hurt.
Beck is hurt. So,
Yeah, I mean that's kind of
it's
it. I mean,
Allar's show really to kind of prove that he can be this guy.
he's the one guy that has a chance to really, really elevate himself. He's the quarterback to watch in the playoff because if he has all the tools, if he puts it together and has a magical type run in the college football playoff, which you don't know, he could do it. He certainly has a good team around him. His stock will rise, and just watch out for that. Now, would I take him based on that? No, no, he's not ready. I don't think 3 games is going to make change my mind on what he is. He's not ready. If we had to comp him today, you have a comp, I have a comp. Why don't you go with your comp first?
Sure. So my comp I did for him was Will Levis. I think Will Levis was probably a little bit more athletic than him, a little bit better of a runner. But both Penn State guys, both prototypical size, highly touted prospects. But had some accuracy issues. But overall was big athletic guys with big arms, all that type of stuff. I think when you see a lot of like the Josh Allen comps, the Drake May comps, and things like that, I think Will Levis fits a little bit more of where he is as a player.
So my comp, it's not entirely fair to Allar, but right now, my comp is Daniel Jones. Um,
I think
Daniel
Levis got
Jones.
comp to Daniel Jones.
I mean, look, think about the type of player Daniel Jones was coming out of Duke and what he was at his best at the NFL level, which was the 2022 version of Daniel Jones, a guy who thrived over the middle of the field in the short area, who was able to threaten teams with his legs, struggled with touch, struggled with accuracy, struggled to lead receivers, but because of his sheer size and his athletic ability, meaning as a big, strong runner, you're talking about a guy who had the ability to at least threaten defenses with his legs. Um, and there's an offense for guys like that, right? There are offenses that are designed for these types of guys. There are limited players, but I went back and looked at his Daniel Jones's numbers. I mean, I'll be honest, dude, they're uncanny. They're uncanny. They're very similar. I mean, fumbles, Daniel Jones is worse than Drew Aller, but otherwise, this was Daniel Jones senior his junior year when he declared 60% completion percentage, 2,670 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Very similar production to what Drew Aller did this year. His big time throw rate was 4.7%. Very similar to Drew Aller this year. His turnover worthy play rate was higher. It was 3.5%. Drew Aller is lower. He's 1% or so. That has to do with the fumbles more than anything. I think Drew Aller protects the ball better than Daniel Jones ever did. Um, Pressure to sack rate also was lower. It was for Drew Aller, it's around 10, 11%, where it was 18% for Daniel Jones coming out of school. And he held the ball a little longer than Aller does. But overall, I mean, we're talking about minor differences. Drew Aller right now is more Daniel Jones than he is Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Way more Daniel Jones than Josh Allen. So I think Will Levis, Daniel Jones, that's the type of player he is right now. Does he have more upside? Yeah, but that's what he is right now.
Yeah, I like that comp. Both can't throw to Theo Johnson.
And so Alex is saying Aller has been solid in the deep ball and Jones couldn't pass the deep ball. That's incorrect. Aller has been awful in the deep ball. And we just showed it. Like he's not been good. He makes a couple of throws here and there, but he does not have consistency with his deep ball. His touch throws deep struggle. He misses
Yeah.
receivers constantly. He underthrows receivers routinely. He's not a good deep ball thrower right now. He
He
could
can,
develop it. He has the arm, but yeah.
yeah, he can get like those deep crossers and stuff like that. But as far as like trying to like lead somebody on like shot plays, really bad outside the numbers, just on those vertical routes.
Yep. So that's QB5. So again, that's our top five QBs. Very different episode than we had this time last year, where we were pumped and stoked for all five. Our top five last year were Caleb Williams, Drake May, Shedeur Sanders, JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix Jr. And we were pumped about all five of them. This year, I'm very stoked about Shedeur and Cam Ward. No doubt in my mind, these two are worth taking, without doubt. Everybody after that is a project. I mean, I think there's a sizable gap. Forget the grades are the grades based on all these different features, because I think when you're grading prospects, you have to add all this stuff up to project. But right now, I think it's those two and Grand Canyon in terms of gap to the next guy.
And the difference last year too is we couldn't figure out who to leave off. We didn't know like it's like, oh, we're really leading off like Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. We're gonna have to wait till next episode. This one's like, yeah, like we're leading guys off. Like I'm sure there's names you guys noticed aren't here that we'll talk about the Ewers, Carson Becks of the world, but it's not like, oh, we're doing these guys got left off because they did it to themselves, not because that there's just too many good guys. It's because they've been playing terribly.
Yeah. Um, that's kind of it. I mean, I think that's our episode. So those are our five. You guys, I think you have a feel for how we feel about these five guys. Bottom line to me is the Giants can't afford to lose. They can't afford to win a game. Like, if you want access to these two quarterbacks that are worthy of taking, my guess is they're probably going 1-2, um, just because of demand. Um, and the way the board may shake out. They may go 1-3, something like that. There's a world in which somebody, for reasons we can't determine, falls further. But I think that if you want access to one of these two guys that are worthy of taking, the Giants really need to not win another game. And if today's practice is any clue, they're trending towards that anyway. But if we don't have a top three pick and we miss out on these two guys, no matter who the GM and the head coach are, Monty, I'll be honest, I don't feel comfortable spending a first round pick on any of these other guys.
So like I said, we went into the season thinking there's two first round quarterbacks. We're leaving the season saying there's two first round quarterbacks. It wasn't the two we went into it, and that's kind of what we expect to some extent. We
Yeah.
expected probably at least be one of these two guys who fell out of favor, and it'd probably be at least one guy that came up, give or take one or two guys, but it basically played out how we kind of thought it would.
All right. So I think that's an episode.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for being here. Again, please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the show on YouTube. That helps us grow and get to more people. Um, and we appreciate all of you being here. Also, if you get a chance on Twitter, please retweet the link to the show. We hope you enjoyed it. Give us feedback. You can reach us always. You can reach me at Queens_guy. You can reach Monty at MONTECRI5TO. You can reach us at He's a Giant Pod. Please subscribe. We will be back next week with our second episode of QB reviews, quarterbacks 5 through 10. And I'll be honest, you may find that group more interesting than some of the guys we went over towards the end of this episode, just because we're
Mhm.
talking about developmental guys who have taken leaps. Some of the guys we're going to go over this year who didn't quite make the cut in this episode, but I thought long and hard about placing them above the guys towards the back end of this episode. So I hope you enjoy that as well. And the last bit of information I'll put out is, somebody asked me, you know, if I can change my name. I don't know if you know the story. There's a whole big spaces issue that went on this week, including today, where I got labeled a possible YouTube journalist. So I'm not going to go into this, but I will change my glorious name from Sal, who is not a content creator, to Sal, who is a YouTube journalist, if this episode gets 5,000 views and if we get to 1,000 subscriptions. So if you guys can help us get to 5,000 views total on this episode by retweeting it, and you can help us get to 1,000 subscribers, I'll change my name to Sal, who is a YouTube journalist. I will not do it otherwise, because otherwise I love my name too much. With that, Monty, you got any closing remarks?
Hey man, it's possible. This show was right around there last year. Let's hope we can recapture some of that magic. Change your name.
Change our name. We'll see you guys next week. I think I don't know what to get. We might be aiming for, we'll see. We'll let you know on the timeline, whether it's Wednesday or Thursday. We had to do Thursday this week just because of personal issues that came up. But if we can get it done by Wednesday, we'll try to. We'll let you guys know. But please be aware, we'll let you know when that episode is breaking. Otherwise, you guys have a great weekend. Um, Go Ravens.
Ravens. See you
See you
next
guys
week,
next week.
guys.